Hello. Happy Monday. Good morning, I think. I have no idea. Am I on? So many things happening right at the moment that I don't know. I don't know. Ooh. Hello, Gabby. I know you're here somewhere. And hello, Sir Frank. How are you? Hope you are doing well and had a good weekend. A little frazzled right at the moment. Flashman. Just looking at too many things. And I was having too much fun in Discord. But oh well. I hope you guys all had a great weekend. I hope that you guys were out of the storms on Friday and Saturday. We didn't get anything serious this time. We just got a lot of freaking rain. So it was fun. Woke up, heard the sump pump like constantly running in the basement, and turned the light on to see water. So I had to go wake my poor husband up at 4 a.m. Be like, there's water all over the basement. But it just, we had just had way, way, way too much rain. So no school today for the kiddos around here. Too much water. Lucky them. But we're here. Hey, Ronnie. How you doing? It is good to see you. Hope you had a great weekend. Last man burned some pancakes. I wish that would have been the most exciting thing that happened to me all weekend. But it's okay. The rest of the weekend went just fine. Basement's dry. Nothing's damaged. I just swear I'm never getting moved down there. But oh well. Anyways, we are going to finish up. I'm trying to think what I'm doing. I don't know today. We're going to finish up. We had about 30 minutes left on cross-examination of the psychologist that was on the stand for the defense for Aileen Wuornos. This is the penalty phase of the trial. And so they're basically trying to keep her alive, the defenses. She's been found guilty on all charges, and this is a capital punishment case. So this is what they're arguing is to try to keep her alive. Hello, Dare. Glad to see you made it on your time. It did not snow in Indiana, although it could have. It's like we had a freeze this morning. The temperature has been just crazy, but I'm not complaining because it's spring and I love it. So if you remember the psychologist, she's pretty good. Most of you liked her. But when the state really kind of started pushing her on some stuff and just kind of rapid firing questions at her, she didn't seem as prepared. And unfortunately, I had to stop there because I had to go get my hair colored. And Gabby's like, I can't hardly see. I was watching back because I had to see where I paused. I thought I wrote it down. I didn't. I was like, holy crap. Just might as well put a wig on. That was shine bright. Hello, Gabby. How are you? So we are going to finish that up, watch The Next Doctor, and then I might just shut this one down, and we may do Lori Vallow's opening statements. I might be a little bit behind on that. I'm really kind of curious to see that, but that trial is scheduled to go till mid-May, and that's a long time. That is a long time, and I was trying to figure out how to make everything work together for about 2 weeks. I don't know that I can. I don't know about going till mid-May with that one. Good morning, Carmen. Hope you are feeling better. Getting some rest because you need to. So Frank, you talking about the doctor trying to explain stuff when flustered? She had a lot of pauses. I did hear Adair was number one. Yes, I would have constant content flashing in. It's a more of a time issue is what I'm trying to figure out. That's what I'm trying to figure out. So I'm kind of been thinking out loud all morning, talking to you guys, talking to my husband, like just talking to myself, trying to figure out what and how I can make this all work and do everything else that I have the responsibility of doing. Today's been worse. Yep. I have a feeling it's going to get worse. Carmen has COVID. She has coof, the vid, whatever you want to call it, like my dad had. And it's this strain, this version of the virus is sitting in your throat. And I have heard it is the worst sore throat you've ever had. And then it feels like you cannot get, when you cough, you can't get anything up and out. So if you end up with a really bad sore throat, like really bad, you better get tested. They're never lonely, Flashman? Is that what they say about people that talk to themselves? They're never alone. I talk to myself all the time, so whatever it is they say, I have probably said it to myself. I talk to myself. I talk to my dogs. Of course, I talk to my husband. That would be rude. But all right, enough of me. So we may do that if you guys are interested in watching at least the opening statements. We just might be a little bit behind, which means we can fast forward. All right, here we go. So this is the state cross-examining Dr. McMahon. I couldn't think of her name. I backed it up just a touch. There was an objection, so I just backed it up to right after the objection. And we got, like I said, 30 minutes of this. And let me know how the sound is. We do have captions for this one. We don't have captions for the next one because why would we?
But you also had her family members that indicated that she was not capable of holding down a steady job, or had not held a steady job.
Insofar as they knew, yeah, but that was a lot of years ago.
And isn't it the fact that you were aware of her arrest history?
Yes,
That arrest history indicated that she had repeated offenses.
yes.
Why don't you tell us what she described to you as her offenses that she had been involved with?
Armed robbery in 1980. That's the one that she was sentenced for. Petty theft in 1978. Drop. Concealed weapon when she was 18 or 19 years old. And that was dropped, but she did have a suspended license subsequent to that same charge. A grand theft auto in 86, which was dropped, and in 1984, uttering a forged instrument. Bonded, this is bonded, picked up, ROR'd, and then questionable.
She had a history of criminal activity, did she not?
Yes,
And then you had the present crime that she's involved in.
yes.
Would you consider the crime that she's now been convicted of to be something that is escalation from a prior criminal history?
I would call that qualitatively different.
So in other words, an armed robbery would be not in your mind any different than a first-degree murder?
No, I'm saying I would consider first-degree murder qualitatively different from anything else that's happened.
Significantly indifferent?
Yes,
Significantly worse?
yes.
So going in and robbing somebody with a gun in your mind would not then be a bad offense?
Objection, Your Honor.
But when you say significantly different, you're talking about an armed robbery with a firearm. Would you consider that to be a severe offense?
Yes,
But not as severe as only as a first-degree murder,
correct?
coupled with an armed robbery?
Yes.
Hello, Ada. How are you doing? been a while. Hope you are doing well. You've been busy, busy, busy over there. But it's good to see you. We're just covering the Aileen Wuornos penalty phase craziness of her trial and the arguing lawyers, which has been fun to watch.
Are you familiar with the defendant's current jail records?
I've read them.
And don't they
And let me say, I've gone over them. I didn't read that stack word for word. I certainly read those that were attached to a deposition, and I leafed through the rest of them.
Were you familiar with any reports of the defendant threatening individuals to claim that they had raped her?
That she threatened that she would claim that they had raped her.
That's correct.
Yes, I am.
And when were those events? When did they occur?
Objection, Your Honor, beyond the scope of the.
Would the fact that the defendant threatened individuals with the crime of rape affect your opinion in any way as to whether or not she was telling the truth or lying as to the
Objection,
murder of Richard Mallett?
objection, Your Honor, beyond the scope.
Would you describe Ms. Wuornos as being irritable?
Yes,
Would you describe her as being aggressive?
when prompted.
In fact, when you first met her, she was some 35 or 40 pounds heavier, was she not?
Yes.
She was a rather imposing figure, was she not?
You're asking my opinion? No, I didn't see her as an imposing figure. No. That, I guess because that was not solid weight. It was not healthy weight.
Isn't it a fact, doctor, that this defendant throughout her lifetime has led a life of manipulation, lying, and use of aliases?
Objection, Your Honor. Unless the doctor formulated an opinion to reasonable certainty on that issue.
Manipulation, yes. Use of aliases, she has done that from time to time. Lying. I have no data that says that that's Ms. Wuornos' usual way of interacting with the world.
Would you consider that when someone identifies themselves as someone that they're not, that they're lying?
I said use of aliases.
So that would be a form of a lie, would it not?
It's deception, yeah.
So she has a history of deception
I'm
and
saying
lying.
she's done that from time to time, yes, yes.
Do you feel you're able to tell when she's telling the truth?
I'm not going to say I can always tell when anybody's telling the truth all of the time.
So you can't tell whether or not Aileen Wuornos was telling you the truth as she recounted the events of the night of killing of Richard Mallett.
In my clinical opinion, I can tell in my clinical opinion, I can tell when she thinks that she is telling the truth to a reasonable degree of psychological probability.
But whether or not that is the truth does not matter in her perception. Is that correct?
Her perceptions of the situation is much more important, much more relevant to me at that point than the objective truth, whatever that may be.
Doctor, would it be fair to say that if Richard Mallett was seated behind the wheel of his car and he had his hands up on the wheel and was passed out asleep, that you couldn't tell us whether or not that is the truth or not the truth when he was shot?
It's true, I cannot tell you that.
You can't tell that based upon the self-serving statements of the defendant to you, can you?
Can I tell that upon the statements of the defendant, how he was? No, I can only tell you her perceptions as she related them to me.
And what she related to you were actions of irresponsibility, of taking no responsibility, that it was all somebody else's fault.
Well, yeah, Ms. Wuornos does not see herself as, does not appreciate her responsibility of being in that place at that time.
Ms. Wuornos doesn't accept her responsibility as being any place at any time, based upon your testimony. Isn't that true?
Objection, Your Honor.
In Ms. Wuornos' eyes, it's everyone else's fault.
Objection, Your Honor.
In the case of the killing of Richard Mallory, isn't it a fact that she accepts no responsibility for her actions?
Objection as to answer, Your Honor.
You found the defendant to be competent to stand trial, did you not?
Yes, sir, I did. Qualified, as you recall.
Not insane.
Your Honor, asked and answered, I think, objection a couple of times already.
So if I understand your testimony, if the defendant feels threatened, she reacts.
Yes,
And whether or not her perception of that is the reality or the truth of what is actually happening, it's based upon her perception, and that excuses her actions in your mind.
Objection, Your Honor.
Well, doctor, does it matter what really happened, or does it matter what she tells you happened?
both.
Well, doctor, if Lee Wuornos had been anally raped and sexually abused by Richard Mallory, and she was really defending herself, you wouldn't need to have any type of dysfunction of the mind to call that self-defense, would you?
Oh, Judge, objection.
You have no idea what happened out there between she and Richard Mallory based upon what she told you, now do you?
Objection as to answer.
Would it be fair to say that this is a primitive, violent, vulgar individual?
Objection to the last one, Your Honor.
Primitive,
Yes, she's a very psychologically primitive individual.
acts out violently,
When threatened, when she perceives herself to be threatened.
whether or not she actually is.
It's true of all of us, whether or not she actually is.
It's true of all of us.
Yes, it's our perceptions in all cases with all of us. It's our perceptions that dictate our behavior.
So whether or not the reality of the situation is occurring, it's simply based upon her perception of it.
Her behavior is going to be determined by her perception.
So
Yes.
therefore, she's not responsible for her behavior.
Objection as to answer, Your Honor.
If you could answer the question.
I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that she is not responsible for her behavior. If I felt she wasn't responsible for her behavior, I would have said that my clinical opinion, she was insane. That's not what I'm saying.
You said that she could understand the nature and the consequences of her acts at that time.
Yes,
And you said that you knew the difference between right and wrong.
yes,
There's no doubt about that in your mind.
No.
And she had the capability of conforming her conduct in a lawful manner that night had she chosen to do so, could she not?
that's not what I'm saying. My clinical opinion, no.
And that's based upon her perception.
Yes,
Whether or not that's the reality of the situation or not.
Asked and answered, Your Honor, a bunch of times. Objection.
Judge McMahon.
Yes, sir.
In this court, Gabby, it probably says their first and last name since they've already called them out. Yeah. You and I were thinking the same thing. And then it says their full name and address under it. No privacy for them. Phone number, birth date. Yeah, that's all on the big yellow button on the poor jury that we're looking at right now and always. Also, I like how he acted like if he felt threatened, he just wouldn't do anything. What do you mean, all of us? If we feel threatened, not saying we unalive people, but we make decisions because our perception is we feel threatened. Okay, if he never has felt threatened, good for him.
Did Ms. Wuornos tell you why she was a prostitute?
she gave me several reasons why she was a prostitute. She told me that she couldn't work because there were warrants out for her, so she couldn't get a job. She told me that she loved men, that she loved having sex with men, that it was good money, that she enjoyed her clients, that she enjoyed all the people that she met.
Except for those last few. She didn't enjoy those. But everything else was good before that. Don't know what happened. Something snapped in that woman.
She received gratification from what she was doing,
Yes,
and she chose to do it because she liked it.
among other reasons. She enjoyed that contact.
Did the defendant tell you that she had practiced getting her gun quickly out of her purse?
Yes, she told me at one time she had practiced.
She called it a quick draw. She whipped out the gun.
Objection, Your Honor.
Overall, answer.
I don't recall, that may be true, I don't recall.
She told you she practiced over and over again getting her gun out of her purse. Did she not?
Asked and answered, objection, Your Honor.
Overall, answer.
She told me she had practiced getting it out quickly.
Doctor, in your opinion, is Lee Wuornos' ability to understand the nature of the consequences of her actions impaired to the extent that her normal faculties were impaired by alcohol?
Alcohol makes all of that, the cortical dysfunction and the borderline personality worse, it simply exacerbates it. So yes, there's an effect from alcohol.
Isn't it in fact, Doctor, that Lee Wuornos told you on different occasions that she had either one or two mixed drinks
No, well, okay, one or two mixed drinks, yeah.
and up to 4 or 5 beers that evening?
Yeah, I don't recall that changing, but yes,
Did alcohol cause the killing?
my clinical opinion, it did not cause the killing, no.
Thank you, Doctor. Nothing further.
Hello, Christine. How are you doing? Hope things are going great for you and you had a great weekend and didn't get any storms. No rain. Unless you need some. You can have some of ours. I don't know what that means. All right, back for the defense redirect, and then we're going on to the next. Whoops.
Just a couple of questions, Your Honor. Are people with borderline personality disorders offensive to other people?
I think the way it's usually phrased is that they tend to cause strong reactions in other people. Generally, this would be negative reactions, or frequently is negative reactions.
What did Tom Evans tell you about Ms. Wuornos?
Objection, Your Honor.
Your Honor, I'm just trying to cover the question asked on cross, if I may.
No, go ahead.
Judge,
Let me learn part of the question, Your Honor.
Yes, I believe there was objection sustained.
That's correct, Judge.
I'll say it again.
Did you rely on Tom Evans's account in formulating an opinion in this case? In your opinion, did you account for what Tom
Oh,
Evans?
yes,
Are accounts of individuals who have come into contact with the client something that experts normally rely on in formulating an opinion?
yes,
You recall on cross-examination, you were asked a question or two about speaking to Mr. Evans.
yes.
What did he tell you that you relied on?
Objection, Your Honor.
Say,
Same questions with regard to the cousin, Your Honor, to save time, would you be sustaining the objection?
yes, sir.
Thank you, Judge. You indicated that Ms. Wuornos loved men and expressed that to you as far as her hitchhiking.
See you, Ada. Have a good day. We will see you soon. Thanks again for stopping by.
Prostitute.
Yes,
Are what you understand her interaction to be with men while prostituting consistent with the way prostitutes are?
no.
What's inconsistent about that?
The very fact that she enjoyed it, stated that she enjoyed it, stated that it was both physically and emotionally gratifying for her, that stated that she would spend more time with them than the contract that she had with them. Did things like holding hands, kissing, affectionate type of behavior. This is not typical. Most clients that, I would say all clients, consistently, clients that I have had that have prostituted for any length of time, it has been an extremely negative experience for them, something that they didn't like, the interaction, and would not get gratification from it, but rather tend to falsify that impression.
These perceptions that Ms. Wuornos had about holding hands and affection, hugging, all of these kind of things, are they consistent with her being primitive?
Yes. Oh, yeah.
In what sense?
Two, one, that she would want that kind of physical contact, tactual contact, and enjoy that even from a stranger. It's like if you're hungry, you don't care who gives you the food, if you're starving. So that, plus the fact that it was a way of obtaining it without the close interpersonal relationship that goes with a long-term sustained relationship. So in that sense, it's the borderline and it's the primitive. It's both sides of that. They oftentimes try and obtain have some kind of a relationship that they can distance the individual as well as have them close, distance them and have them close. They tend to yo-yo people. So this is a nice way of doing that in the sense of getting your needs met without having the demands, if you will, of an ongoing interpersonal relationship with them.
What was your understanding of Dawn Neiman's account regarding Ms. Wuornos' developmental years? Of Dawn's account?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the rest of
Dawn's
it.
account regarding Ms. Wuornos' developmental years.
She had become friends with Ms. Wuornos basically through Ms. Wuornos' brother and sister. And then they had sort of palled around together for a number of years, according to Ms. Neiman. That Ms. Wuornos had been very protective of her, that she had would say to her one or more times during the day, "You wait here, I'll be back after a while, I gotta go do some things and come back with money." And Ms. Neiman assumed that she was prostituting. That sort of fascinated her because she had never known anybody who was a prostitute. Related that Ms. Wuornos always carried a weapon when she was out on the streets. They spent time hitchhiking around places all around town together, and that I believe she said Ms. Wuornos would buy things for her from time to time. They had gotten into a fight, according to her, in which Ms. Neiman had come out the winner.
How old were they at that fight? Or how old was Lee at the time of the fight, from what you can piece together?
Well, from what I can piece together, she would have had to been over 15 because she was already out prostituting and not in school. Now, keep in mind, Ms. Wuornos has a different account of that, but that's Ms. Neiman's account. They drew apart when Ms. Neiman met the man to whom she's currently married. Ms. Wuornos, as she describes the Ms. Wuornos' response to that, I guess from a clinical point of view, I'm seeing her as sort of getting kind of jealous of the fact that Ms. Neiman, who had never had a boyfriend, now has a boyfriend, and also feeling somewhat rejected. So she pulls apart away from her somewhat angrily.
You indicated, Mr. DeMore asked you a number of questions about Lori and Barry Wuornos' account.
Yes.
You indicated there were other accounts other than Ms. Wuornos' which were not consistent with Lori and Barry's. Do you recall that?
Yes.
Regarding the family? What were those accounts about?
Both from the cousin and from Ms. Wuornos' biological mother.
And in a nutshell, what did they relate regarding the grandfather?
The Jekyll and Hyde side of him when he was drinking, the fact that he was verbally abusive to the children. Don't have anybody that says he was physically abusive, but that he was verbally very abusive to the children. The compliance, that he not only drank heavily, but forced her mother to drink. And that the family, and this comes from somebody else also, but the family, basically after her mother's death, her mother's family then ostracized her father because of feeling that he was responsible for her death due to the alcohol.
You had a number of written statements from Lori.
Yes.
And a number
Well,
of
what do you mean by written?
written statements that investigators had taken.
Oh, yes.
They were
I'm sorry.
typed up.
Yes, yes,
You had one by a fellow by the name of Goretsky, a law enforcement officer up in Michigan.
yes.
One from an investigator named Paget, guy out of Citrus County, an investigator,
That talked to her mother.
that talked to Lori and Barry.
If that's in that package.
You had more than one from each.
Yes, yes,
And
yes,
you had a couple of statements and the deposition from Ms. Moore.
yes, and the statement from her mother.
Did you review all of those documents and formulating an opinion?
Yes.
From a perspective, John, in looking at Ms. Wuornos' developmental history, just looking at that, does it really matter if at the age of 14 she became pregnant as a result of a rape or just became pregnant, given what happened to her during the course of the pregnancy?
In terms of reflecting the dysfunction or a dysfunctional situation, no, it doesn't matter.
What is it?
Either you have a youngster who at 13 or 14 was raped, or you have a youngster who is out sleeping with somebody at the age of 13 or 14, which is inappropriate sexual behavior for that age.
Thank you, ma'am, because the state made me so mad with their line of questioning on that topic with her. Well, she was lying about that. Whether she was essayed or not, she was pregnant at 14. That's a fact. She gave that baby up for adoption. Period. Full stop. That's it. You cannot question that. And to question how and if her story is right, well, this woman just said it. At 13 or 14 years old, she's pregnant. How she got there doesn't matter. It does matter, but it's inappropriate for that time of somebody's life to be doing those things at that age. So I'm glad she said that. It doesn't matter in the big picture of things. It's like, I know, flashback, it's Florida. And I just get really touchy on those questions because this is why people don't come forward. And she had so many other things going on. But if that's just a person that doesn't have the other baggage that Aileen carried, why would you ever? Because you're going to be made the villain in all of it. And there are people that lie, which make it even harder for people to come forward. But it just bothers me what the state did when we watched it last week. I mean, it's like, if she's sitting there and she is an actual victim of this, you are victimizing her again, and it's horrible. But anyway, that's my little rant on that.
That says something about not getting their needs met at home. It says something about their developmental background. It says something about the inappropriateness of that type of behavior at that age. It also, the fact that she was not comfortable telling her family until she couldn't not tell her family.
What does that say?
It says that she did not have a relationship with her mom and dad, with her grandparents, that while it may have been very beneficial to her in many, many ways, that it was not one that spoke of security and trust and feeling that your caretakers will help you. They may be very angry at you at the moment, but that ultimately they will stand behind you and will help you and that you can go to them when you're in difficulty, regardless of how you got into that difficulty, it does not bespeak that.
Is she good at manipulating?
Yes.
In what sense?
Let me back up. Is she good at manipulating? Let me rethink that answer. I answered too quickly. Does she manipulate a lot? Yes. Is she good at manipulating? In my clinical opinion, she's not all that good at it. And I guess that's, when you asked me, is she good at manipulating, my thought was, does she do it a lot?
Tell me
Yes.
about manipulating a lot first.
Ms. Wuornos doesn't have many. I don't think she has any. Healthy, adaptive, interpersonal skills for getting your needs met. When we don't have that, we rely on what do we know? Well, every child knows how to manipulate. That's one of the things that we learn when we're very, very young, and it's the way we first start getting our needs met. Now, hopefully, we grow and we learn other ways, more mature ways of getting our needs met, although we all manipulate to some extent all the time. I mean, we all do that and we accept it. If I say good morning to somebody, I expect, and one of the reasons I'm saying that is so that somebody will say good morning back to me. That's a socially acceptable manipulation. We all agree to those manipulations. Okay, so we all do that at some level, but hopefully we basically try and get our psychological needs met in more mature ways. Ms. Wuornos does not have those more mature, adaptive, healthy ways of getting her needs met, and so she does it by manipulation. But frankly, she's not real good at it. And I'm saying that because it's obvious that she's manipulating. And when people are good at it, if you know that you've been manipulated, it's only later. And then we're usually kind of pretty angry at the fact when we suddenly realize I've been manipulated. Sometimes we can be manipulated and never know it. That's when somebody's really good. But with Ms. Wuornos, it's pretty obvious that that's what she's doing. It's kind of like when a child tries to manipulate, and a child, we usually think it's kind of cute, but after a while we think it's not so cute as they get to be older and they haven't learned better ways of doing things. We generally don't think it's so cute, and we don't think it's cute at all in an adult, generally.
The neuropsychological and psychological testing that you provided to Ms. Wuornos, does that have mechanisms by which malingering or faking can be checked?
Yes.
Did you employ those mechanisms in this case?
Yes.
Was the testing valid?
Yes.
Any impression that Ms. Wuornos was not trying her best on the testing?
No, she was trying her best. And everything that has any kind of validity measures, they're all valid. And let me, the same is true of her school records. They make the same statement that she tried very hard on the tasks. She tried certainly on mine. Everything that I understand is she's tried hard on all of it.
Thank you, Doctor.
You need to keep the witness further into the discharge.
That's all for that one. Finally. I don't think she was helping Aileen either, Adair. I think she got lost in there somewhere. And the state flustered her, I think. And they did a good job of flustering her. All right, so we've got a forensic psychologist now that's going to try to help her. Nope. Not correct, Flashman. you put things like that and then everybody runs away. No. No. I don't remember this dude's name. I'm sure we'll find out in a minute. No closed captions. Sorry. Not that those other ones are great, but sometimes they're funny.
Dr. Krop, when you settle in, if you could just state your full name for the record.
My name is Harry Krop.
And what is your current occupation, sir?
I am a clinical psychologist licensed in the state of Florida.
Can you tell us a little bit about your educational background?
We stipulate to credentials, and Dr. Krop is a clinical psychologist.
And it said forensic psychologist in the description. Thank you, Court TV. And also an honest thank you to the state for stipulating so we don't have to go through his CV. This is Dr. Krop, Krop, I believe is how it is spelled. A clinical psychologist, not a forensic one.
Competent to testify in this court and has been deemed an expert in other fields.
Your Honor, we would also, Doctor, yes, Judge. Doctor, just tell us a little bit about your experience in the area of forensic psychology.
We're going to hear it anyway.
I've been doing forensic psychology probably since 1977. I've been the director of my private practice since 1973 or 74. But I've been doing forensic work, that is psychological principles to psycholegal issues in both criminal and civil cases since about 1977. The areas of specialty within forensic psychology would be in the evaluation of first-degree murder defendants and also in the area of sexual abuse.
Tell us a little bit about your work in the area of sexual abuse and psychosexual issues involved in the mental health field.
I started the first sexual abuse treatment program for the treatment and therapy of sexual abuse victims. That was the first program of its kind in the state of Florida. We started that in 1977 through a grant from HRS and began formally the treatment of both the offender as well as the children and also the parents of the children who had been molested. Since that time, we have continued to work in that area and have probably evaluated over 500 children who have been sexually abused.
Please, court, we've stipulated to the expert qualifications and object to any further random dissertation of experience and credentials.
Judge, this is not by way of voir dire, but just by way of tying the doctor into his testimony. Doctor, you've heard the state stipulate to your qualifications as an expert. You have testified in the courts of the state of Florida.
Many times, yes.
And you have testified before his honor.
Yes, I have.
And you've been retained by both the state and the defense in criminal cases.
Yes, I have.
The questions that I'm going to ask you now deal with specific issues relating to this case. And you were talking about your experience in the psychosexual area. Just tie that together for us.
Well, as I was saying,
your own background.
As I was saying, I have been involved in the treatment of both sexual offenders as well as sexual victims of abuse for approximately 14 years. We have evaluated over and treated over 500 children and have evaluated and treated over 4,000 sex offenders.
And in the area of homicides that you were discussing, what experience do you have in that area?
I have evaluated, according to my latest statistics, 435. This would be the 436th first-degree murder case that I have been involved in evaluating.
Of those, how many times has the defense called you to testify?
I've testified for the defense of those 400 plus cases on about 40 to 45 times.
Do you know why the defense did not call you in the other 395 cases?
Well,
If you know.
certainly one reason would be if the case were resolved without it requiring psychological testimony. The other reason would be that if my evaluation is not particularly helpful to the defense, since almost all of the times when I would be requested to do an evaluation by the defense, it would be on a confidential basis. So after the defense attorney reads my report or knows what I have to say, if the attorney does not feel that I would be helpful in a case, I would not be called to testify.
You have also been retained by the state in homicide and in criminal cases, have you not?
Yes, I have.
And you discussed at length some of your experience in the forensic field. Do you also have regular patients, people with non-criminal justice system related issues that you see?
I have a clinical practice, but I would say over the last few years, because of the number of evaluations I have been asked to do, I've limited my clinical practice to about 10% of my practice. I have other therapists who work with me in my practice who do primarily therapy.
Are you familiar with neuropsychology?
Yes.
And what is neuropsychology?
Neuropsychology is a specific field within psychology which deals primarily with brain behavior relationships. That is, primarily through the use of specific and specialized psychological tests, we are able to assess a person's functioning or dysfunctioning and then relate that to various areas of the brain, whether the person is functioning normally or abnormally.
And in your experience, have you assessed issues of cerebral dysfunction, cortical dysfunction, brain damage in cases that you've conducted evaluations in?
I came to Gainesville originally in 1971 for the express purpose of doing a postdoctoral internship in neuropsychology. And since that time, I have conducted several hundred neuropsychological evaluations, both at the VA Medical Center, where I was employed, and also in private practice, sometimes for court purposes and other times in terms of diagnostic purposes.
In terms, withdraw your honor. When you approach a case, and we'll talk about Ms. Wuornos in a moment, when you approach a case such as Ms. Wuornos, what mindset do you bring to your evaluation?
Well, certainly part of it depends on the particular questions or opinions that I'm being asked to address. Generally, in a criminal case, there are two basic questions, and that is the person competent to proceed, that is, to assist his or her attorney? And then the other major question is, what was her mental status like at the time of the offense in terms of whether she was insane or not? In first-degree murder cases, there is an additional issue, and that is, if she were not insane, were there any other factors, mitigating factors, which may explain or have influenced that person's acts at the time of the offense? And when I evaluated Ms. Wuornos, of course, those were the three major issues that I addressed in the beginning of the evaluation.
And in conducting that evaluation, do you bring such an evaluation, do you bring a perspective that there's a certain opinion you want to see if you can form, or how's that done?
Well, I certainly try as best I can to maintain as much objectivity as possible in terms of looking at the evaluation. Obviously, in doing an evaluation, one of the things that a psychologist is going to look at is to try and explain the person's behavior. That explanation can come from various sources. It can come from background. It could come from the testing and so forth. But I certainly try not to have an opinion preconceived prior to doing any evaluation.
Did you, Lee Wuornos, person
Yes.
seated to my right. Your Honor, we would formally tender Dr. Krop as an expert at this juncture. I think Your Honor heard the stipulation previously.
You may inquire, Mr.
The state already stipulated. What? Okay. Also, every time he says an S sound, the witness, it is like, it's a very high pitched sound in my ear. I don't know if it is in your guys's or not, but it's like, owie. Well, sorry, Gabby. That's the way it was here all weekend. That's why we are flooded right now. I mean, we aren't, but the area. I don't know, Flashman. We'll see if they ask him anything, but they stipulated to it, and then he's like, "I'm going to ask him anyway." Okay, well, hopefully we just got a shortened version of it. See what the state does. Don't ask him any questions with the sound in it, please. It is Herbert. Yes, it is, except worse.
Interview, sir.
Your Honor, we stipulated a while ago.
You may proceed.
Yes, Your Honor. You know Lee Wuornos, the person seated to my right, do you not?
Yes, I do.
And you've had an opportunity to evaluate him.
Correct.
In conjunction with that evaluation, have you had the opportunity to review records, police reports, investigative reports, depositions, other psychological mental health reports, transcripts, all sorts of information about him?
All of the above, yes.
Big bunch of stuff.
Yes.
Did you also have the opportunity to review testing regarding Ms. Wuornos?
Yes, in this case, when I evaluated the defendant, she had already completed a battery of psychological tests by 2 other mental health professionals who have evaluated her. So it was not necessary for me to do any psychological testing on Ms. Wuornos, and I relied upon the test data that was supplied to me by both of the other psychologists.
Have you reviewed that test data?
Yes, I did.
Did you review test data and/or notes from, well, let me go through with you the 4 other experts, the 4 other mental health practitioners who have seen Ms. Wuornos, and tell me if you've had an opportunity to review notes and/or test data and/or confer with Dr. McMahon,
Yes,
Dr. Bordini,
yes,
Dr. Toomer,
yes,
Dr. Bernard.
yes.
In conducting your evaluation, were you able to formulate an opinion regarding Ms. Wuornos to a reasonable degree of certainty?
Yes.
Can you tell us what the diagnosis is?
Based on my evaluation, the primary diagnosis for Ms. Wuornos would be a borderline personality disorder.
And what is a borderline personality disorder?
Well, let me preface that, if I may, by just saying that obviously we all have personalities and everyone is unique.
What's up, Daddy Short Nuts? How are ya? Good to see you, Dr. Toomer. I just want him to not say any words with the S. And if he has to keep saying her last name, my ears might start bleeding. Yes. Flash fan, that made me laugh that you're surprised that I know Family Guy. Daddy Short Nuts, we used to have, he unfortunately passed away from a heart attack, but there was an emergency room doctor and his last name was Slaughter. I was like, who wants that? Dr. Slaughter? No thanks. No, thank you. But unfortunately, he was out hiking and died of a heart attack.
The personality is formed both in terms of genetic factors as well as environmental factors and various other educational things that occur throughout our lifetime. Generally, when a person starts into adulthood, that personality is relatively fixed. In some cases, however, that set of traits or behaviors that we call personality becomes maladaptive. That is, it creates in a person various dysfunctioning and various patterns of maladaptive behavior. When it becomes to that extreme or to that degree, we call it a personality disorder, and it becomes a clinical diagnosis as listed in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, the 3rd and Revised Version. Yes. So in order for a person to have a personality disorder as opposed to just personality traits, the person has to meet specific behavioral criteria as listed in that DSM-3R, which is used by almost all mental health professionals to render a diagnosis. In her case, and as
Let me just ask a couple of questions. A personality disorder, as listed in the DSM-3R, is that a disturbance?
yes,
Is that something that is common in the population?
a personality disorder.
Right.
It's common, of course, in clinical populations. Hopefully, it's not as common in the overall population.
And what is a clinical population?
Clinical population are those individuals who exhibit some type of impairment in their functioning. They just basically behave differently than what we would consider the normal person.
So it's common, it would be common among individuals who are disturbed or impaired.
Sure.
I cut you off. Please go on.
Please go on.
What is the borderline personality disorder? How does it interplay with who he is and who she's been?
Well, as I said, for someone to be diagnosed as a personality disorder in general, these behaviors or traits that are characteristic of the person has to cause significant impairment in functioning for it to be diagnosed as a personality disorder. Then, depending on what those behaviors are, depending on what those traits are, you check it out basically with the DSM-3R and determine the nature of the personality disorder. There are numerous personality disorders, but one has to meet certain criteria to be labeled a particular diagnosis. In her case,
Does she have significant impairments in functioning?
yes.
Okay. And in her case?
In her case, she clearly fits borderline personality disorder category. Let me add that up until the most recent DSM-3, the last two, the DSM-3 and the revised version, the borderline personality disorder was not even listed as a category. There were several traits that a borderline has that were mixed in the other categories, but enough research was done to demonstrate that there are individuals who share very, very common characteristics and traits sufficiently from the research done to be a separate category in and of itself. There are numerous books that are written now on the borderline personality disorder, partly because they are very complex individuals and individuals that are very difficult to deal with therapeutically as well as interpersonally.
Before the current DSM-3R, such individuals would be listed as having other personality disorders, some of them, right?
Yes,
Some of them might have been listed as schizophrenic, right?
that's correct.
Some of them may have been listed as paranoid.
That's correct.
Some of them may have been listed as suffering from a major mental illness instead of the borderline personality
That
disorder.
is correct.
And it is with the common current DSM-3R that we know we can hone down more particularly what the disorder is.
That's correct.
I'm sorry, go on.
The definition of the borderline personality disorder is a pervasive pattern of instability of mood, interpersonal relationships, and self-image. That's the general definition of a personality disorder. Then there are 8 criteria, among which in the DSM-3R, the person has to have 5 of those criteria to actually be diagnosed as borderline. And in Lee's case, it is interesting to note that according to my data, she would have all 8 criteria out of the 8. The books that have been written on personality disorders essentially would refer to her as absolutely classic in the sense that she meets all of these different criteria. Her life is basically characterized by all of the cases that are written about in terms of personality, borderline personalities. I think to simplify, and then I can just explain it in a simpler form, the borderline personality has to meet 5 of the following 8 criteria. One is a pattern of unstable and intense interpersonal relationships. The second one is impulsiveness. The third one is unstable moods. In other words, just tremendous mood shifts from one period of time to another, sometimes in a very brief period of time. The fourth criteria is an inappropriate, intense anger or lack of control of anger, frequent displays of temper and anger. The fifth criteria is recurrent suicidal threats or gestures, sometimes self-mutilating behavior. The sixth criteria is marked and persistent identity disturbance, manifested by either problems with self-image, sexual orientation. The seventh is chronic feelings of emptiness or boredom. And then the eighth is frantic efforts to avoid real or imagined abandonment. So in my review of Lee's life and background, she would fit all 8 of those criteria. The personality disorder, the borderline, basically has 2 major themes typically in their life. One is problems in terms of victimization in their background, and the other is feelings of abandonment. And as the DSM-3 says, it's either perceived or real. In Lee's case, based on the history that I have, she was legitimately victimized when she was younger, and she was also legitimately abandoned. So these are not just perceived, although it really wouldn't matter whether it occurred or not for the fit the criteria. I think the easiest way to describe a borderline is by talking about a vicious cycle or a number of paradoxes or contradictions in a person's life. Because the person perceives herself to be abandoned or rejected, she is always suspicious. She is always looking out that something like that is going to happen. But yet, on the other hand, she develops these very dependent relationships, very intense relationships with other people, yet they're never very meaningful and they're never very healthy, because in the back of her mind, she's always looking out as far as when the next rejection is going to come. The other thing that's most significant is the basic primitive childlike coping mechanisms that this individual uses. Basically, we see a lot of complaining. We see a lot of temper tantrums. We see manipulation, but generally very naive manipulation, something that's very obvious to the outside person. We see these changes in mood states in terms of sometimes just attention-getting type of behaviors. And then sometimes to the extreme, we see self-mutilation. Most of the time, the self-mutilation or self-destructive is attention-getting, attention-seeking. It's trying to show the world how desperate the person is, but most of the time they really don't want to die, although certainly sometimes it gets to that point. In Lee's life, in terms of the criteria of a borderline, this is so classic in terms of, on the one hand, developing these extremely intense relationships with people, constantly looking to get attention, constantly seeking affection. At the same time, her behavior totally pushes people away from her because, again, of the perception that somebody's going to do harm to her, that somebody's going to reject her at some time. And in her case, it was primarily due to a lot of background issues that Lee went through when she was a child.
Does somebody in childhood or in adolescence choose to have such a disorder?
I don't think any of us choose to have certain personalities. We're essentially, to some degree, born with certain traits. That's why we often see certain traits in our parents that we have. Sometimes there's a tendency to rebel against those traits, but we don't choose until a latter point in time. We choose behaviors, and we certainly have to be responsible for our actions, but essentially we don't choose the kind of personality we have.
How about a disturbed personality? Does someone choose that at some point?
Again, the person tends to choose a certain set of behaviors as the person gets older, but the personality itself influences those kinds of behaviors that we choose to do. So a disturbed behavior, now certain personality disorders serve the person in certain ways. For example, a very dependent personality disorder. The person doesn't want to change that, at least part of that person doesn't want to change because he's being taken care of and he may feel that that's important. But generally speaking, in my clinical practice and all the literature I've reviewed on borderline personality disorder, part of them know how dysfunctional they are. They essentially beg sometimes to be different, yet at the same time, their behavior is so dysfunctional and they push people, even their therapists, away from them. And it becomes very frustrating to deal with the borderline. So it's this vicious cycle, this, on the one hand, yes, I want help. On the other hand, pushing people away from it.
You indicated that there's a genetic component.
There may be. We don't have the answers in terms of totally how much heredity and how much environment plays in the part of various personality disorders. Obviously, if a child grows up in a dysfunctional family and becomes dysfunctional him or herself, we can suggest that it's possible because she was born with some of the same traits as those dysfunctional parents. At the same time, she grew up with those dysfunctional parents, so some of it certainly, or most of it, can be environmental. And we know there's an interaction, but we just don't know the degree.
Was Lee's childhood background consistent with folks?
I didn't hear you.
I'm sorry, was Ms. Wuornos' childhood background consistent with folks who suffer from a borderline personality disorder?
Absolutely.
In what sense?
Well, from the materials I reviewed, and partly, of course, from her own report, Lee's biological mother was described and has admitted in terms of her interviews with investigators that she was a promiscuous person. She basically was extremely young. She was 16, I believe, when she conceived Lee. She was at the end of her relationship. The relationship with her husband was breaking up, and she abandoned Lee. She also reported that she had been sexually abused and had grown up with a father who turns out actually that's Lee's grandfather, but who actually raised her. But that grandfather was an abusive individual, both physically and sexually, to Lee's mother. Lee's father, whom she never knew, basically was described as a very violent individual with sexually deviant characteristics, and in fact, he was convicted of rape and kidnapping, was sent to a mental institution, and then eventually sent to prison, where he committed suicide in 1965 by hanging himself. Lee's mother did not feel that she was capable of raising Lee, so before Lee was even 1 year old, Lee's mother essentially left her in the care of her grandparents, so Lee had no contact with her biological parents after that time. Lee's, and I will refer to them as mother and father, who were actually her grandmother and grandfather, were also dysfunctional people. The father was described by, I didn't mention this earlier, but I had an opportunity to interview Lee's cousin, Mr. Latella, who describes Lee's grandfather, as being a Jekyll and Hyde type individual. He was a severe alcoholic. He was an extremely dominant personality. He was extremely critical of Lee as well as other children. And when he was drinking, which was most of the time, he could be violent. So we have her father/grandfather being a violent individual who physically abused Lee and who was an alcoholic. He was very dominant in that Lee's mother/grandmother was an extremely passive individual who also drank intermittently. I don't know if she'd be considered an alcoholic, but she drank early on in her life and then toward her death. And she basically was ineffective in raising Lee or intervening in the physical abuse. The school records, which I reviewed, indicate that Lee was probably born with a hearing disorder, a hearing impairment. It's constantly through the school records that she was having difficulty and that she suffered from a hearing impairment. The mother/grandmother was constantly requested to authorize an evaluation of her, and the records constantly suggest that the adoptive mother essentially ignored all of the school personnel's requests to have Lee even evaluated for hearing impairment, even though it was fairly obvious. The mother did not go to the school, she did not attend meetings and so forth, and as I said, was viewed as a very ineffective and passive individual who did not intervene when Lee was being either mentally or physically abused. The grandmother died when Lee was about 15 years old, and about 4 or 5 years later, the grandfather also committed suicide by, I believe, carbon monoxide. So both of the male father figures in Lee's life committed suicide, and both of the mothers were essentially neglectful and ineffective mother. The person that Lee was closest to was her brother Keith, who I believe was 1 or 2 years older than she, and he died when he was 21 years old of cancer right after he came back from the military. So the one person that she really was close to also died.
Excuse me, Mr. Coleman. We folks stand.
Thank you. Just to summarize what I was saying, the two significant father figures in her life killed themselves and were deviant individuals. The two mother figures were ineffective, and she was abandoned by her biological mother, and then her brother, whom she was close to, died of cancer when he was 21 years old. The other significant aspect of Lee's childhood or adolescence was basically sexual abuse victimization. She reports to me, and there are reports that I reviewed in terms of other people that, of course, she has reported, to that she was sexually abused on numerous occasions when she was a child. The first occasion that she makes reference to is when she was about 13 or 14, in which she was sexually abused by a man who was the father's friend, a man who was in his 40s who gave her a ride and sexually abused her, and Lee became pregnant as a result of that sexual abuse. She hid her pregnancy for 6 months due to the kind of relationship she had within her family. She felt the need that she could not talk to her father or mother or other relatives about it. Finally, after 6 months, she had to disclose her pregnancy, at which time she was immediately sent to a home for unwed mothers, spent about 3 months there, had the baby, and had to give the baby up for adoption. It was at this point in time that she began running away and ended up coming back for her mother's funeral, but then was sent to a juvenile home for runaways when she was about 15 years old.
Let me just stop you there before we pick up again. Did Ms. Wuornos really think she could conceal her pregnancy?
I'm sure she probably did feel that way. I guess she felt that she had no choice really in the matter, in terms of no one really to talk to, no one really to support her. She also did not want to reveal at that point in time that she was sexually active. So there were many reasons why Ms. Wuornos felt the need to hide her sexual abuse victimization and the resulting pregnancy.
How old was the other man?
She describes him as being in his 40s. I don't think she's totally sure of that.
And was the pregnancy discovered eventually?
Yes, when she was about 6 months pregnant.
What happened then?
That's when she was sent to a home for unwed mothers and had to give up the baby for adoption.
Did you talk to Ms. Wuornos about how the grandparents perceived her when it was discovered?
They essentially perceived it as her fault. They perceived it as her going places where she shouldn't be. They perceived it as her not listening to them. She describes her parents as being very sexually repressive. They did not talk about sex. They did not think that sex is something that should be discussed among family members, despite the fact that Lee's biological mother describes her adoptive father as being sexually abusive to her, as well as to a child who stayed over at her mother's house on one occasion. But so the grandfather was really giving mixed messages to Lee with regard to sexuality.
This is Lee's biological mother?
Yes.
What did she describe?
Lee's biological mother, Diane Tully, described her father, who was Lee's adoptive father, having sexually abused her, and also the way she put it, put the make on one of her girlfriends when she was spending the night. And he came into the bedroom. She does not know whether anything happened to that girlfriend.
Was Ms. Wuornos, Lee Wuornos, willing to acknowledge sexual abuse on the part of the grandfather?
No.
Keep going.
She did acknowledge on at least 4 different occasions from the time she was 13 to 17, additional sexual abuse or sexual assault on her. Once when she was 16 and a half, she indicated that she was gang raped. Once when she was 17 and a half, she was tied up and raped. And these are by men who are slightly older than her on most occasions.
This is after she's left at home.
This is after she left at home. She basically was not under any supervision. She was sleeping in abandoned cars, and she got involved with these at least 3 or 4 other incidents. One in which she indicated an attempted rape, in which she said she was physically assaulted, but she was able to get away from this individual before he raped her. The other aspect of her childhood was that she also was involved in an incestuous relationship on one occasion with her brother, who was the one that she was close to. and they were fairly similar of age. I believe he was 1 or 2 years older. So as you can see, from the time she was about 13 on, before she reached adulthood, she had a tremendous number of sexual experiences, beginning with sexual abuse and also intermittently having been sexually assaulted and victimized. It is not unusual for an individual who has been sexually abused to become a victim. Nowadays, fortunately, we have treatment programs, we have public awareness programs.
Objection, Your Honor, this is not a question on the floor.
I'm sorry, if you could rephrase it, not in the context of current assistance provided to folks who have an abused background, but just in the context of Ms. Wuornos' case.
Excuse me, Your Honor, please, and I've lost the question. Could you just ask the question again?
Yes, Judge. What are the effects of this type of background on someone in their adolescence?
Typically, when a child is sexually abused, that person becomes more vulnerable to further sexual abuse or begins exhibiting various types of emotional indicators of that victimization. Lee never received any treatment for sexual abuse, so she also did not receive the support from her environment, from her parents. And although the symptoms are often mixed with individuals who have been sexually abused, two of the most common sexual abuse manifestations are either hyposexuality, that is an individual who views sex in an aversive way and tends to withdraw from sexual experiences, or hypersexuality, a person who can become promiscuous and who essentially becomes involved sexually as her means of gaining attention and gratification, emotional gratification from another individual, which apparently is the route that Ms. Wuornos took.
After she left home, after the age of 15, how did she survive? You indicated she was sleeping in abandoned cars, but how was she surviving? What was she doing for a living?
She essentially survived on a day-to-day basis. Sometimes in abandoned cars, sometimes she would go and ask relatives to take her in. Sometimes she would go to friends and try and get them to take her in. She began, as she was getting older, again, someone, and I don't recall exactly how old she was, I believe when she was about 17, offered her money for the first time for a sexual experience. And at that point in time, she had eventually developed the tendency to start getting money through sexual favors. And of course, she went through a period of intermittent prostitution after that period of time, and then essentially became a full-time prostitute somewhere in 1984, I believe.
You spoke of self-mutilating, self-injurious behavior that folks suffering from an antisocial personality disorder exhibit. Any evidence of that in Ms. Wuornos' case?
She described a suicide attempt in 1977 when she shot herself, I believe, in the stomach. And then she described other incidents of suicide thinking or suicide gestures or suicide attempts, but I did not get the impression that she actually ever tried to commit suicide on any other occasion other than 1977. There was an incident in 1981, I believe it was, when she seriously considered shooting herself, basically because she had broken up with a boyfriend or he had broken up with her, and she was extremely disturbed and on the one hand felt, again, this intense rejection which borderlines feel. And again, the way they deal with it is rather than change their behavior to try and allow the other person to get close to them or maybe change some of the behaviors that will reinforce the relationship, they exhibit all these unhealthy type of behaviors, the pushing the people away, the primitive type of coping that I referred to.
The first incident you spoke of is when she shot herself in the stomach.
As far as I know.
And have you had access to the hospital records on that?
I don't recall.
Were you able also to review documentation and a mental health report regarding the robbery on which Ms. Wuornos was convicted?
Yes.
What were the circumstances of that, as you understand it?
As I understand them, this is the situation that I was referring to a little while ago, in which she had had a conflict with her boyfriend. Her boyfriend had rejected her, and she was thinking in terms of killing herself. She had a gun. She was drinking. She took drugs, and basically was on her way to kill herself, or somehow get attention from her boyfriend that she was suicidal. In the process,
Excuse me, Your Honor, for clarity, may the witness indicate the source of this information?
You can leave that on the cross, sir.
Yes, sir.
You reviewed the psychiatrist's report regarding the prior robbery.
it was Dr. Barnard's report, I believe, in 1981, in which he described her description, and her description to me was very consistent with what she described to Dr. Barnard.
And you reviewed documents from the court file regarding the prior robbery.
Yes, I believe there was a pre-sentence investigation which also described that situation.
That was a report to the judge, a pre-sentence investigation report.
Correct.
And Ms. Wuornos entered a plea of guilty in that prior robbery.
Yes.
And from those documents and from your other information that you reviewed and reviewing materials from other experts, what is your understanding?
Of that incident,
Yeah.
her perception of what happened was that she went into this store.
When you
I
say
believe-
the store, what store?
I believe it was a convenience store.
And what was she wearing?
I'm not sure. I don't have that written down what she was wearing. She indicated to me that she had consumed a case of beer, a half a pint of liquor, and 4 Librium, and went in, and I'm not sure what she intended to purchase, possibly more beer, but she indicated that she did not go in there with the intention of robbing it. Put her purse on the counter. The gun was in the purse. The convenience store clerk, for obvious reasons, got scared. At that point in time, Lee indicates that she realized that maybe this is a way of showing how much she needed the attention of her boyfriend. So she then said, "Give me the money," and basically took the money. I'm not sure exactly how much, but she was apprehended by police officers shortly after that.
Do you recall Dr. Bernard's report in the PSI indicating that she was wearing a G-string?
Yes, she was on her, should have remembered that. And she was on her way, I believe, to the beach, and when that happened.
What was her relationship with Mark, with the boy she was seeing at the time, as far as you can understand it?
Lee just describes it as a boyfriend-girlfriend relationship, from what I can recall.
And you indicated that the relationship fell apart.
Yes.
What happened to her after that?
I believe after that, of course, she got involved with two gay relationships subsequent to that. I believe both of them were subsequent. I'm not totally sure. I know one was the most recent one with Ty. But essentially, from that point on, again, she was out in the streets and on the road, and did a lot of prostitution, at least from about 84 on.
Tell us about the first one, the one with Tony. How did that come about? What were the circumstances of that? What is your understanding of that whole relationship?
Well, my understanding, again, as is typical of a borderline, it was a very intense relationship. I believe it lasted a couple of years, and it was one of these relationships in which, on the one hand, Lee describes how much she loved her and how close they were and how much they needed each other. At the same time, she described an abusive, unhealthy, dysfunctional relationship.
In what sense?
In terms of there was physical confrontation between the two of them, and I do not have all the facts of that particular incident other than to suggest that Lee has indicated that, again, it was a real unhealthy, she doesn't use the term unhealthy or dysfunctional, but the way she describes the intensity of it, sometimes the physical assaultiveness between the two of them, it was a very unhealthy and dysfunctional relationship, as has all of Lee's relationships been.
Is there any evidence that Lee was abusive to Tony?
No. Not that I'm aware of.
What happened to that relationship?
Well, it broke up. And again, I'm not sure of all the details of how that happened.
Then what happened?
Well, as I indicated, at that point in time, Lee pretty much drifted and was involved in various relationships, short-term relationships, spent a lot of time on the road, spent a lot of time in terms of very short-term relationships, being picked up by men and getting involved in prostitution as a livelihood.
What was the situation with Tony and Barbara?
Well, she was involved with Ty for about 4 years, essentially, from what I can gather. I guess the best way to describe it again is very intense. I think the interesting thing from Lee's perspective is that although she certainly admits that it was a lesbian gay relationship, that there was a sexual relationship, she also indicated that Ty was her best friend and that she was Ty's best friend. And that for the last 2 to 2.5 years, there was minimal sexual involvement, and they essentially were involved in a extremely close relationship. They both worked in one capacity or another. They both contributed to the relationship in terms of money, although Lee would bring home more through her work than Ty. But again, it was just one of these very emotionally charged relationships. There was jealousy on the part of Ty. Ty had difficulty accepting the fact that Lee was involved with other men, but basically came to accept it as, again, a livelihood. She would not accept if Lee were to get involved with any other men in an emotional relationship, but somehow was able to accept the prostitution, apparently.
Is there any explanation that you can provide us for Lee's engaging in these relationships with the two women? What's that all about?
Well, again, that's typical of a borderline. There's identity conflicts. Sex has been a major theme throughout Lee's life. Again, based to some degree on the victimization, to some degree on some rebelliousness on her part in terms of her father. And primarily, Lee was able to gain attention and affection through sexual relationships. Now, the relationship, again, with the two women, Lee considers herself bisexual. She indicates that these are the only 2 gay relationships that she's been in, and she indicates that she loves men and enjoys being with men. But in terms of an intense live-in relationship, the women apparently satisfied her emotional needs better.
Any reason for that you've been able to ascertain?
Not really. She was married for a very brief period of time. Again, she married somebody who, again, I think most people would view as an unhealthy relationship. He was in his late 60s or early 70s. That relationship lasted about a month. And Lee admits that she was involved with him for security, thinking maybe this man would sort of take care of her as a father figure. He was able, according to her, she might be able to stop working because he might be able to take care of her financially. But again, as in most borderlines, once they get into a relationship, it becomes extremely dysfunctional.
And in her adulthood, she began, well, throughout her adulthood, she drank,
Yes.
you know? You, in fact, did you make any findings regarding her alcohol dependency?
From a diagnostic standpoint, I would say she certainly drank sufficiently, and it had a significant influence on her life so that she would be diagnosed as alcohol dependent. I think that probably what's most important about the alcohol was how it interacted with other aspects of her life, that was, again, one of her primitive means of coping. The borderline typically finds not all borderlines drink, not all borderlines use drugs, not all sex abuse victims drink or use drugs, but that was her means of coping with life, drinking, developing these unhealthy relationships in order to try and get accepted by others. And of course, again, her hypersexuality was her means of being accepted.
You indicated that one of the characteristics of the person suffering from the borderline personality disorder is impulsiveness in at least two areas that are damaging to itself.
Yes.
Is Lee impulsive?
Lee's very impulsive. Lee has demonstrated her impulsiveness in terms of just since her incarceration. During my evaluation, there must have been 3 or 4 times when she pretty much jumped up and wanted to stop the interview. I was able to encourage her to continue. I was supportive of her. We gave her enough time to sort of pull it together and continue her relationship, continue her discussions. But her impulsivity in terms of her past history, both in terms of the depositions that I have reviewed and the various investigative reports that would suggest that this woman has been impulsive most of her life.
Does she have an impaired judgment?
Certainly at times.
Does she have a lack of insight?
Absolutely.
Give us some examples of that.
I would say that if either a professional or a non-professional asked Lee whether she was disturbed emotionally, whether she had serious psychological problems, I would say she'd probably say no. I would say that she would indicate that it's society that is basically blaming her, that society doesn't listen to her, that society doesn't understand her. She sees, and in fact, one of the reasons why she's resistant to really being evaluated, although obviously she understood the purpose and she knew that it was important for her to cooperate, but she just does not view herself as being a disturbed person.
Is that common among disturbed individuals, particularly with a borderline personality disorder?
Generally speaking, yes. They can, after the fact, take a look at their behavior and say, why did I do that? That was stupid. Why did I do that? It caused her to not like me or him not like me. But oftentimes they will then revert back to the same maladaptive behavior and interactional patterns.
And you indicated that, not in these words, but that she's emotionally labile.
Extremely.
What is that? Define that for us. Tell us what that is.
It's an individual who will shift from one mood state to another most of the time without any obvious provocation. A person can be feeling okay about things, and with the slightest stimulus, this person will become either extremely depressed from being happy or extremely loud, could become belligerent, could become demanding, could become manipulative. All of these mood shifts. I guess the way the cousin described the grandfather as a Jekyll and Hyde, I think, to a common sense kind of thing, it's almost like a Jekyll and Hyde kind of scenario.
Has Lee withdrawn? You indicated that one of the criteria was that Lee suffers from chronic feelings of emptiness or boredom. What is the emptiness about? As a clinician, what does that mean? How's that reflected in Lee's case?
I think we all strive for some degree of satisfaction, for some degree of gratification in life. Some of us get it from our profession. Some of us get it from family. Some of us get it from friends. Some of us hopefully get it from all of those. Lee never felt a sense of that. She probably would admit or indicate that she got that from her relationship with Ty, or that she got it even from her relationship with men that she got picked up by.
Did you talk to her about those types of incidents?
Lee described her prostitution both as a livelihood and also in a lesser extent as a way of developing relationships, as a way of being with people. She would talk about individuals who would pick her up that she would not have sex with, who she would spend time just talking to, holding hands, basically dating. One of the individuals that I spoke to indicated that Lee had picked him up during this time period that we're talking about, and indicated that he spent 5 days with her in Tennessee and Kentucky or South Carolina, I believe, spent the night with her on 4 different occasions, spent 5 days. They never engaged in sexual activity. He indicated that he had a lot of money on him. She wouldn't take money even for lunch. She wouldn't let him buy her lunch, and that she was very supportive, and that he was physically ill. She made sure, in fact, he said she nagged him about taking his blood pressure medication. So apparently she is capable of having these relationships for brief periods of time, and used her prostitution as a means of being befriended by people or befriending others.
What happened with that individual?
After 5 days, she went on her way, and he went on his way, and she eventually came back to Florida, I presume.
And they were staying together?
For 5 days.
Where were they staying, you know?
In terms of
Not location, but what, was it on the road? Was it at his home? Was it?
motels.
You also talked a little bit about cerebral dysfunction, and you indicated there is evidence of that in these cases.
From the testing that I reviewed, there appears to be what we call soft signs of brain damage, cerebral dysfunction. Not to the extent that she's not responsible or capable of functioning in an everyday kind of situation, but when we see these types of what we used to call minimal brain damage, basically there are certain characteristics that are fairly common among these individuals: the poor impulse control, impaired judgment, poor coping, low frustration tolerance. Her intellectual testing, which has been done by both Dr. Bordini and Dr. McMahon, and then also in the school records, indicate that there is a significant difference between the 2 general areas of intelligence, which we refer to as verbal and nonverbal. Her nonverbal skills, performance, ability to work with her hands was very high. It was above average, whereas on the other hand, her verbal abilities, and we're not talking about talking, but things that are related to certain parts of the brain, were much lower, significantly lower, which either is the result of the cerebral dysfunction or could be explained by some type of learning disability, which may have contributed to some of her academic problems. But all of that suggests that this is a person who would have difficulty coping, would get frustrated easily, and certainly may have been a contributor to the borderline personality disorder. I don't know that, but certainly that interaction, she's got 2 strikes against her when you look at the personality disorder and the cerebral dysfunction in terms of the way she copes with stress.
The verbal aspect of the intelligence testing that you spoke about, that deals with things like comprehension, reasoning, concept formulation.
Exactly, abstract.
Hello, Bri. You're just the little relief that we needed. Oh my gosh. I can't wait for the state to cross him, because he's very relaxed up there, and they really flustered the last lady. But I hope you had a good weekend. Oh, that's funny. Because he's just kind of leaning back. I don't know if the state's going to be able to get at him as he did the woman, but hopefully we'll see her shortly, because they've talked a lot, and I can't speed this up. Trust me, I looked to see if I could.
Thinking, judgment, ability to assess the situation and the consequences of that situation.
And those are the things that are impaired
Yes,
in Ms. Wuornos' case.
yes,
That split between the verbal and performance ability, that was spotted by the schools, was it not?
yes,
It's in her school record,
yes, it is.
and it's consistent with the current test.
Yes,
Dr. Bordini gave something to Ms. Wuornos called a Holstead-Raytan battery, and that had an impairment index of 0.7. Is that an impairment when you have an index at that level?
yes.
Go ahead, Norman.
Yes, sir.
The disorders referenced in the DSM-3R, the manual that clinicians use, particularly the personality disorders, are all of those the product of a genetic component and/or environment?
Most likely. Again, we can't say for sure what causes certain kinds of behavior disorders, but the research generally shows it's a combination of the two.
Thank you, Doctor. May we approach the phone?
Yes, sir.
The school record that you testified about that indicated, spoke to her impairment, said moral values, concern for her family's hurt contribute to her guilt feelings. Is that something that is common in children raised in a dysfunctional family?
Sure.
In what sense?
Well, and it's very common with victims of sexual abuse in the sense that because the person is relatively young and is taught by family and parents to respect authority and respect parents, and the parents know what's right. Once you're involved in a
All right, how many of you just heard Cartman? He's, respect my authority. I wouldn't know that one either, Flash fan. It's just a joke. Never watched South Park a day in my life. I don't even know how I knew that came from South Park.
dysfunctional kind of situation, you essentially, if things don't go right, you take on that responsibility yourself. You tend to blame yourself for the problems within the family. It's one of the things we need to do in therapy with victims is to try and make sure that they realize that they're not at fault for the dysfunctional family. They didn't bring themselves into that family situation.
Putting aside any issues of direct abuse involving Ms. Wuornos, throwing those out for a moment, was the family still dysfunctional?
Oh, yes.
And was that a dysfunction that would affect someone?
I would expect so, yes.
The report that we're talking about is a school report from 1970 that was prepared by mental health folks and relating to Ms. Wuornos also indicates the outstanding feature of Lee was a remarkable concern for strong family ties. What's that all about?
Wishful thinking, essentially, on her part. When I talked before about the lack of gratification in her life and the loneliness and so forth, it's because I believe Lee still has a fantasy of being part of a family, of being part of a healthy family, and we all do, of people that love us. And Lee was always striving for that.
It is vital for this girl's welfare that she receive counseling immediately. Do you recall that to be the concluding line of the report?
Yes.
Did she receive the counseling?
No, her mother apparently did not give her permission or follow up with that recommendation.
To this day, has she received that counseling?
No.
The report also indicates that use of a mild tranquilizer was unsuccessful in improving behavior. Well, why would the schools prescribe a mild tranquilizer?
I would presume, because I don't have the direct report of whoever prescribed it, but I would presume that her anxiety and agitation and poor impulse control resulted in a referral, at least to a nurse or to a medical doctor, who apparently attempted to alleviate some of this anxiety through some type of sedative drug.
And her anxiety, poor impulse control, agitation, you see all of that here, don't you?
Yes.
Sitting before you today, right?
Yes.
Thank you.
You want to proceed, correct?
Your Honor, it's my understanding that they were going to call another mental health care expert, so we're ready to continue or whatever.
Why don't we take a break, Judge, and we'll all talk and see where we're at.
We're ready to proceed cross-examination.
Yes, Your Honor, I determined to, in light of his testimony, to just go without the transcript. I don't see any significant difference.
All right, here we
Please
go.
support.
He'd already moved the podium, so we won't have to move it. I swear they have danced with that thing all the way around that courtroom. I want it here. Nope, I want it over here.
Good morning.
Yeah.
Dr. Krop, did I just attempt to manipulate you?
I'm not aware of it.
Simply a greeting, right?
Yes.
Psychologists sometimes disagree, don't they?
On manipulation?
On a lot of things.
Some do, yes.
Diagnoses, for instance.
I would say in the past, there was more likelihood of differing on diagnosis because of the lack of objective criteria, but certainly there is certainly much more agreement since the DSM-3 and DSM-3R have been formulated.
May I borrow your book, Mr. Jones? See it right together. Are you familiar with this book entitled Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, 3rd edition, revised?
Yes.
Is that what you're referring to?
Yes.
Okay. Since this book and its predecessors came out, psychologists have agreed a lot more because they're following the criteria of the book, right?
Correct.
Before that, they're kind of left out there to fashion their own diagnosis from whatever other sources were available.
More so, yes.
You're calling the first DSM, Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, came out?
The year?
Yes, sir.
No,
Approximately?
I really don't know.
Before you
It was
started
before I started practicing psychology.
Okay. How about the 2nd edition?
I'm not sure of that either.
What edition was in vogue when you took it out?
The DSM-2 for a few years, and then the DSM-3, pretty much when I was in graduate school, was the one we relied on, and then the DSM-3R in the last several years.
Why didn't they call it DSM-4?
There is a DSM-4 that is, I believe, coming out soon.
Okay, so there's a revision between the 3 and the 4. That's why they call this the R.
Most likely.
And as this book grows and changes and the criteria change, so will the diagnoses and the titles, right?
In some cases, yes.
And criteria for the diagnoses.
In some cases.
I mean, this really is basically, I guess, in the field of diagnostics for a psychologist, and I don't mean to be irreverent, but really a professional Bible.
In a sense, yes.
You indicated that before, 1984? Before the DSM-3 came out, there was not even a category called a borderline personality disorder?
Before the DSM-3, the borderline was in the DSM-3. Before the DSM-3, there was no diagnostic entity as borderline personality disorder. There were descriptions of the same kind of behaviors, but they were essentially labeled something else.
But you would not have come in here and testified before DSM-3 came along that she was a borderline personality, right?
That's correct.
You called her something else.
Yes.
With regard to the history from her, and you talked to her mother personally?
Did I what?
Talked to her mother personally?
No.
Well, you never talked to your mother, the one that you've been talking about a lot here?
I reviewed an investigative report by someone from the, I believe, from the Volusia County Sheriff's Office who did a taped interview with
An
her,
investigative report from the Volusia County Sheriff's Office?
whoever the investigator is.
Someone,
Yes.
okay, but you never talked to that lady?
No, I didn't.
Okay. And as far as the allegations, which you got, I guess, third hand, that Ms. Wuornos' mom was sexually abused, you have no idea whether that's true or not?
That was what she said in that interview that I read.
No, that's what someone told you that she said.
No, I read a transcript.
Okay. But you don't even know who took the interview or who they were talking to, do you?
I could look that up if you want me to.
You don't know. You have something that you read, right?
Sure.
And Ms. Wuornos has indicated to you that she was not sexually abused by her father or grandfather, correct? In fact, this cousin who seems to know so much about the family, what was his name?
Mr. Latella.
Okay, is he the one that referred to the grandfather as favorite uncle? His favorite uncle? That's why he was over there a lot?
I don't know if he referred to him as his favorite uncle.
With regard to the school records, and I'm referring to the report which you read from when she was in the 8th grade, April 13th, 1970, it begins with the sentence as follows: Aileen Wuornos has concerned school personnel by antisocial behavior.
Yes.
Correct? And it goes on to say the mother sees Aileen as a temperamental child who dislikes taking direction. Right?
Correct.
Is it unusual to find 13-year-olds that dislike taking direction?
No.
And they go on to talk about the test, said she had a low verbal IQ, kind of a low, dull, but normal.
Yes.
Not outside the normal range.
I believe that her verbal IQs in all of the testing have been on the low average, low
I
normal.
was asking you about this when she was 13. It's not outside the normal range, was it?
Low average, I believe.
Not outside the normal range, so.
Well, see, normal, I'm trying to use what the category is. The category is, normal is a diagnostic or an academic category.
Let me just, without getting.
If you would read me what the IQ is, I can answer your
It
question.
says here, Aileen obtained a verbal IQ 80, comma, low, dull, normal.
Right.
And that's what the report writer who examined her said, correct?
But you asked me whether that was outside the normal range, and I said yes.
But the report writer said it was normal.
No, he did not, or she did not. She said low normal.
And maybe may I approach the witness? Do you have a copy of it?
I may not have it with me.
Am I misreading this? Does it say verbal IQ 80, comma, low, dull, normal?
That is what it says. It does not say normal. There is a difference in the categories of
Your Honor, I don't have a
IQs.
question. I
If
finished
this
the
makes
question. Thank you. With regard to the IQ performance, 106 average, right?
106 is average, yes.
And indicates she had a well-developed superego, correct?
Yes,
But she had guilt feelings about her family.
that's what it said, yes.
She had great concern about moral values and concerns for the families, concern for her family, correct?
That's what it says, yes.
Those are pretty normal reactions for a 13-year-old, aren't they?
Yes,
With regard to her choice of prostitution, and her promiscuity, has been virtually a chosen way of life for her during her adult years, has it not?
Yes, it has.
She's free to choose otherwise, correct?
That is correct.
She can work like most folks and earn a living at a job that's lawful.
She could have, yes.
But she learned very early that 75 cents an hour versus $60 to $100 a trick made prostitution more appetizing for her.
I can't say that that's the motivation, but she certainly learned that that is one way to make a living.
Then she shot herself in the stomach in 1981 because she's upset over her boyfriend.
I don't believe she shot herself in the stomach in
I'm sorry,
1981.
1977.
Yes. Yes.
Because she's upset over her boyfriend.
I don't remember the circumstances. The 1981 incident is when she was upset about the boyfriend, when she was involved in the convenience store incident. 1977, I'm not sure what the details are in terms of when she shot herself in the stomach that required surgery.
But you were aware that was because she's upset about her boyfriend.
Yes,
Different boyfriends?
apparently.
Doesn't do much better with girlfriends, does she? With regard to her erratic behavior.
That is correct.
As far as the circumstances of the robbery, you had parts of the pre-sentence investigation report. They pretty well reflected her version of the facts, right?
That's correct.
Did you read the victim's version of the facts?
Yes,
You didn't read them in the courtroom with the jury, though.
Objection, Your Honor.
I wasn't asked to.
Just ask a question.
Did you read them in the courtroom with the jury?
No.
Objection, Your Honor.
You recall that in the report, do you have a PSI report there?
Yes,
Okay, you don't need to pick it up, but if you think I'm wrong, then correct me, please. Elizabeth Smith, the manager of the Magic Market and clerk on the afternoon of the robbery, stated the defendant entered the store, did not appear to be intoxicated, and appeared to know exactly what she's doing. She pulled a gun and stated, "Would you believe this is an armed robbery?" The defendant was not in a hurry. She put her hand in the cash register and refused to take the change, but just the paper money. Elizabeth Smith stated that in a situation like this, a situation like she was in, you never know what the person holding the gun is going to do. There's a great deal of fear. That was Elizabeth Smith's view of the robbery, right?
that's correct.
And no apparent evidence of intoxication,
According to a lay witness, that's correct.
according to the victim.
Yes,
But Aileen Wuornos would say she was drunk, so it wasn't her fault.
I don't know if Ms. Wuornos ever told me that it wasn't her fault.
She indicated she'd been drinking an awful lot, right?
She did, that's
And
correct.
she did it because she broke up with her boyfriend.
That was a motivator, according to her. Yes.
Okay. We have two reasons for the robbery. One is she was drinking a lot, and number two, she broke up.
Do you hear somebody else talking? Is Eileen talking? Like, I keep hearing a woman. Maybe it's just my imagination. Although he's not really rattled, this dude, yet. So he's still just sitting back like, whatever. Hurry up. Ask me your questions.
With the boyfriend. Did she give you any other reason?
She never told me that the reason for doing it was because she was drinking a lot. She just indicated to me that she was drinking a lot. She indicated that the robbery was something that was not planned when she went in there, but once she went in there, she had thoughts about this would be a way of demonstrating and getting attention from her boyfriend.
I'm glad to know it's not just me.
When she talked about this prostitution way of making a life and her girlfriend, Ty Moore, she said Ty didn't like her being a prostitute, did she?
At first,
And in fact, Ty didn't want her to be a prostitute, correct?
according to Ms. Wuornos, Ty gave her mixed messages. On the one hand, she would have preferred her not to be involved with men in any capacity. At the same time, she reinforced Ms. Wuornos for bringing home the money from her prostitution.
She helped her spend the money.
She used the money, yes.
And they were both working, both were contributing,
Yes.
but Ms. Wuornos brought home a lot more money because she worked a different type of job.
I'm not sure it's a lot more money, but it was more, and it was more variable.
Well, did you know Time Moore was primarily a house cleaner at motels, things like that?
What I'm saying is overall, it was more money, certainly.
Are you aware that Time Moore did menial type labor,
Yes,
probably in the $100 to $300 range at best a week?
probably, yes.
And you aware that Aileen Wuornos, by her own testimony, made $600,000, $800,000 a week prostituting.
800,000 a week?
No, 600,
800,000.
800, maybe 1,000 a week
Oh, okay.
prostituting.
Yeah.
You said 800,000, sir. She said 250,000 men. You said $800,000. You're both wrong.
Aware of that, right?
Yes.
I mean, she was capable apparently and was making $30,000 to $50,000 a year tax-free, wasn't she?
Yes,
So she was the breadwinner, so to speak.
yes,
But Ty continued to work at her jobs, right?
correct.
Now, it's a common pattern of Ms. Wuornos to blame others for her acts, isn't it?
I'm not aware of her tendency to blame others for her acts.
All right, well, she didn't-
She justifies her acts, but I'm not sure she totally blames other people.
Well, she justified the robbery because she'd been drinking and was upset.
No, she just explained it. She didn't say that it wasn't wrong or that she shouldn't have been arrested or convicted for it.
Her explanation with regard to many of the subjects you interviewed her without, almost at least without exception, if it involved her committing a serious criminal act, she put the blame on the other party, didn't she?
For provoking it, yes,
In every instance, really.
yes.
Really never her fault,
And she always felt that it was self-defense.
always. With regard to her various stories concerning killing Mr. Mowry, you certainly, as you've indicated, viewed the videotape and read the typed transcript which accompanied it for your purposes. She didn't accept the responsibility for killing him, did she?
Well, she accepted responsibility for it, but she felt that she did it in self-defense and therefore should not be criminally responsible.
She felt she was fully justified.
Yes,
Same with every other killing, right?
yes,
Now, this story of justification where she describes ultimately an anal rape, being tied up, alcohol squirted up her nose, things like that. The first time you heard that story was when?
Your Honor, objection beyond the scope.
Overruled.
first time I heard it personally
Yes, sir.
was when she told me during the interview on January 19th of this year.
Okay, just 10 days ago.
Yes,
In the interview with the police officer, deputy sheriff that was videotaped, she not once told being tied up and raped by Mr. Mowry and having alcohol squirted up her nose, did she?
she did not go into those details, no.
And in fact, when Dr. McMahon first met with her, that was the psychologist. You know Dr. McMahon?
Yes,
She's a shorter lady with hair the color of yours.
I know Dr. McMahon.
Okay. You both work in Gainesville?
Yes.
You kind of associates type?
No,
I
no,
don't mean in professionals.
no, we've been involved in some cases together.
Okay. All right. Now, Dr. McMahon, as you know, is appointed as a confidential expert to assist the defense and work with Ms. Wuornos. And you're aware of that, correct?
Yes.
Objection, Your Honor, the witness. That's beyond the scope of this witness.
If you had knowledge, you can answer.
I'm aware that she was appointed as an expert, as a confidential expert.
And you have all of Dr. McMahon's notes of her tests and interviews, correct?
As far as I know,
Okay. And she, Dr. McMahon, met with Ms. Wuornos February 26, 1991, right? First time?
yes,
And did not mention one time to Dr. McMahon, according to her notes, that she had been tied up and raped and had alcohol squirted all over, things like that, did she?
It's not in her notes, that's correct.
And then she again met with Dr. McMahon on March the 8th, 1991, and again, didn't tell her anything concerning being tied up with a rope, and anally raped, and alcohol squirted in her nose, correct?
Not in her notes, that's correct.
Okay. But she did tell a first version and described in detail an alleged attempted rape by Mr. Mowry, didn't she, there on March the 8th?
She described the incident, she described violence, but as far as I can tell from reading the notes, she did not describe the same details that she subsequently told Dr. Bordini and myself.
A few days ago.
Yes.
Right. What I'm asking is, on December the 23rd, now this is the third interview, Dr. McMahon, psychologist.
Right. That has been the question that has not been answered this entire time. We thought maybe he was an alternate, so he would, but he's still here after the verdict. Maybe he's still an alternate? I don't know. But yes, he's been there. They've all sat in the same seats because we're all like that. But he's been there the entire time. Maybe that's just where he wanted to be. I don't know. And Flashman, I've never had a Swedish fish candy. And if it's that sour, it makes your teeth hurt. I don't want one. And I don't want it in a donut.
Didn't help her. She still hasn't told anything of being.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the objection.
I didn't either.
Argument.
She didn't tell one time of being tied up, raped, and alcohol squirted up her nose and all that stuff, did she?
I have no idea what was asked of her. From the notes that I reviewed, she did not, Dr. McMahon did not indicate that she informed her of those details during those interviews.
I told her a lot of other details about an attempted rape with clothes on and just didn't unzip pants, right?
She had discussed that, yes.
And finally, December 23rd, she tells Dr. McMahon a similar story to what she told you in the courtroom.
I don't know what she told the court, but according to the notes, it was consistent with what she essentially told Dr. Bordini and myself.
What she told you now.
Yes.
With regard to the truthfulness of the reporting, doesn't your opinion as a clinical psychologist depend at least some degree upon the truthfulness of the facts reported by the subject, Ms. Wuornos?
Probably the most important aspect in terms of an opinion is that
Excuse me, I can ask you which is most important in just a minute. Okay.
I don't think I can answer that yes or no.
You can't answer which is most important.
No, not without explaining.
Okay. Well, let me ask the question, see if you can answer without explaining. If you can't, then we'll get to the explanation, all right?
Okay.
Doesn't the accuracy of your diagnoses and virtually any other clinical psychologist depend at least in part on the truthfulness of the person being interviewed?
At least in part, yes.
And if that person is deceptive or lies or tells half-truths, it may result in an inaccurate diagnosis, correct?
That is correct.
And in fact, you have, to your knowledge, at least one other instance of a threat to falsely report a rape by Ms. Wuornos, don't you?
Objection, Your Honor.
There's no rule.
A threat, yes.
Okay. And in fact, she had threatened to report that the deputy sheriffs that took her to her psychiatric exams had tried to rape her, didn't she?
Objection, Your Honor.
There's no rule.
I'm sorry, Mr. Tanner.
In fact, she had threatened to report that the deputy sheriffs that took her to her psychiatric exam in Dr. Barnard's office had raped her, didn't she?
That is what the officer said, yes.
She didn't deny that, did she?
No.
Now, with regard to the opinion as to whether or not she had a personality disorder, is there a reasonable medical probability that she may have had a concurrent or a co-personality disorder, or has?
Certainly, there is a possibility in any individual that they may have more than one personality disorder concurrent, and I consider that in this case.
In fact, these categories of these conditions for mental disorders may not even be wholly relevant to legal judgments with regard to individual responsibility. Isn't that correct?
I'm not sure your question. They do not suggest that the person is not legally responsible.
Okay. With regard to an alternative diagnosis, did you consider in your evaluation after having looked at everything you said you did, that in fact, Ms. Wuornos may be suffering from an antisocial personality disorder?
Sure, I consider that.
In fact, she met most of the criteria, didn't she?
She met 3 of the 4 required criteria, in my opinion.
Okay. And which one did she not meet?
In my opinion, based on the data I have, she did not meet the criteria which states that there is an evidence of a conduct disorder with the onset before the age of 15, as indicated by a history of 3 or more of the following, and then there's a list of 12 sub-criteria in which she has to have been documented to have met 3 for that criteria to be satisfied.
All right, so in fact, what you're indicating is that she didn't meet even 3 of the 12 possible indicia that would have caused you to diagnose her as an antisocial personality?
That's correct.
Okay. I'm looking and I know you have your DSM-3R with you. Certainly, before the age of 15, it was evident that she was a truant, correct?
No,
No?
I don't have evidence of that. The school records that I'm aware of do not suggest that.
Okay. Well, surely it's been revealed to you she had run away from home at least twice overnight.
I'm not aware that that happened before the age of 15.
Well, how about that she often initiated fights?
I don't have any data on that. Again, before the age of 15, which is crucial for this diagnosis.
I see. In other words, if she met all of these criteria under that age category, but she was 16 and it wouldn't count?
That is correct.
Okay, what about 15 and a half?
That's correct.
How about 15 one day?
That is why we have this type of manual, so people can have some objective, so professionals can have the same criteria to go on.
And your standards such as she was 15 years old in one day and met all of those criteria, she still wouldn't count as an antisocial personality?
Not technically.
Okay, because it was one day past her 15th birthday.
That is correct.
Is this science or art or what do you call it? Science or an art or what?
It's a behavioral science.
Okay. Is this behavioral science really that exact that one day, one birthday day would make the difference for all the people that ever examined?
First of all, we're not talking about that in this particular case necessarily, that it's one day. You asked me the question hypothetically if I would technically have to rule out that diagnosis. And I said yes.
Okay.
But
thank you. With regard to her other problems, she didn't have hallucinations or delusions, did she?
she reported some aberrant, some unusual phenomena which occurred when she was younger, but I certainly would not describe her as being psychotic.
She had no psychoses, correct? No mini psychoses, miniature psychoses.
Not that I'm aware of.
Would a mini psychosis be where you have psychoses for a few minutes or a few hours and you don't have it again?
That's your term. I've never really heard that, but I presume you're referring to what we would call an acute psychotic break, which is something that happens at a given time period, and then fairly soon after that, the person becomes pretty normal again.
You have never even heard the term mini psychosis, have you?
No.
Until I just kind of used it.
Yes.
Excuse me, I'm a lawyer, not a psychologist. Other than the fact that the subject, Ms. Wuornos, and let me ask you about a couple more of the categories. You said that she didn't do some of these things that she had to do according to the Psych Bible before she's 15. Was there certainly evidence that she had set fires? I'm reading from the book, deliberately engaged in fire setting before 15, wasn't there?
I'm aware of one incident in which she and her older sister were involved in a fire situation. I am not aware, nor do I have evidence to suggest that she deliberately engaged in the fire setting.
Don't even have that? Okay. How about that she often lied before she's 15?
That is probably accurate.
Okay. And had stolen without confrontation before she's 15?
As far as I know, there is one incident to suggest that would hold.
So all it would need to be is any one of those other things before 15, and then she would have been an antisocial personality, wouldn't she?
Correct.
Was there anything in her behavior, other than the fact she, according to her self-reporting, did not support an antisocial personality disorder versus a borderline personality disorder? Was there anything in her behavior that indicated she was not an antisocial personality?
I think that's a double negative, but
Okay.
I'm not sure.
Didn't mean to
She
do
does
that.
not meet the criteria according to the DSM-3. She has exhibited antisocial behavior from the time that she has been an early adult.
Well, in fact, according to the, I guess, school psychologist on April the 13th, 1970, when she was 13 years old, she was right then and there, just demonstrating antisocial behavior. What?
That's what the report says.
Okay. Well, that's what the psychologist said when she did the report.
Right, but the report also talks about a superego, which is essentially analogous to a conscience, which we typically don't see in a person who has the antisocial personality disorder.
Okay. Did you see evidence of a conscience in her from your examination?
Yes.
Are you, surely you're aware from the videotape and the transcript that she said it was all right to kill these men because they were all up in years and didn't have parents at home. Did she say that?
Objection, Your Honor, beyond the scope.
It's right on point.
If he has one, you can answer.
And beyond the scope of the hearing, Your Honor, Eighth Amendment.
I'm sorry.
Beyond the scope of the hearing, Eighth Amendment.
There's no rule.
Said that, didn't she?
With regard to the incident itself, she has not expressed guilt or conscience, but you asked me whether she has expressed conscience, and I'd say yes.
Just no guilt or conscience for killing Mr. Mallon. Is that what you're saying?
Objection, Your Honor.
Is that what you're
She
saying?
felt it was self-defense.
And in fact, I'm sure you're aware, she indicated to one of the other persons that she talked to, which I'm sure you have the report, that these men deserve to die because they're cheating on their families. Did she say that?
She indicated that, yes.
Not much conscience there, is there?
Objection, Your Honor. I approve of it.
Read Spain there.
No further question, Your Honor. Thank you. Thank you, Doctor.
You're correct, sir.
Yes, Your Honor.
Doctor, the diagnostic criteria for an antisocial personality disorder under the DSM-3 are?
Yes.
And we move the podium again. Did you know the state moved it all the way over from where they had it during the the regular phase before the penalty phase. And now this guy, he was always moving it. And now he's moving it back to where the state moved it. That's the most riveting thing that's happened today. Also, I only have one parent left. Does that mean I'm almost unalivable? Scary.
That to you?
Yes.
They describe people with antisocial personality disorders as the following. Frequently, there are signs of personal distress. Is that true here?
Yes.
Excuse me, Mr. Nelson. If you're so back.
Thank you. These signs include complaints of tension. Is that true there?
Yes.
An inability to tolerate boredom and depression, which they constantly have to deal with. Is that true here?
Yes, that characterizes her.
And the conviction, often correct, that others are hostile toward them.
Yes.
Is that true here?
Yes.
That's the antisocial personality disorder.
Yes.
Assuming hypothetically that someone has an antisocial personality disorder, where does it come from? Is that someone chooses when they're a child?
I wish we really knew where it came from. It certainly doesn't come from something that the person chooses to do. The person does not make a choice of a particular personality, which is going to perhaps result in that person being incarcerated in his either juvenile or adult life.
A child doesn't wake up one day and say, Mommy, Daddy, I want to be an astronaut, I want to be a fireman, I want to be an antisocial personality. That doesn't happen, does it?
No.
Are there genetic factors?
There may be, yes.
Are there environmental factors?
There definitely is, yes.
People with antisocial personality disorders, is that a disorder in the DSM-3? Is that something they suffer from, which experts recognize?
Yes.
And disorder, I take it the word means it's something that's not usual.
That's correct.
It's a problem.
Yes.
So does DSM-3R?
Correct.
It's a mental health problem, is it not?
Yes.
If we had an antisocial personality disorder, would that in any way change the fact that she has impairments?
No, not at all.
Would that in any way change the fact that she has poor judgment?
No.
Right, anti-disestablishmentarianism. Sounds like supercalifragilistic, or you need some Pepto-Bismol. Not sure which one.
Would that in any way change the fact that she lacks insight?
No.
Would that in any way change the fact that she was raised in a dysfunctional family?
Certainly not.
Would that in any way change the fact that she has no impulse control?
It's poor impulse control. That's correct.
Would that in any way change what you saw here during the cross-examination?
No.
And that was poor impulse control, wasn't it?
It appeared to be, yes.
Would that in any way change her background?
No.
Would that in any way change the way she sees the world?
No.
You're familiar with Kaplan and Sadek, are you not?
Yes.
It's a psychiatric textbook,
Correct.
a counterpart to the DSM-3R.
Yes.
And you're familiar with Kaplan and Sadek's description of personality disorders.
I have read it, yes.
That description encompasses borderline, antisocial, dependent, all the personality disorders. The introductory part.
Right. Any disorder which causes a person to be dysfunctional.
You tell me if this is consistent in your experience with all personality disorders. People suffering, and this is from Kaplan and Sadek, from personality disorders exhibit the repetitious self-detrimental responses that are often associated with the behavior of persons who are fatigued. Is that true?
Yes.
Brain damage?
Could be, yes.
Under severe stress?
Yes.
Immature?
Certainly.
Primitive?
Yes.
Lacking in impulse control?
Yes.
Lacking in judgment?
Yes.
Or otherwise regressed?
Correct.
Emotional pain is often accepted as inevitable rather than as something one can learn to avoid.
Correct.
It's true of all people with personality disorders.
To varying degrees, that's
It
correct.
doesn't matter how you label it, all of those disorders have that in common.
That is true.
On a scale of mental health, personality disorders fall between neurosis and psychosis. Is that true?
Yes.
In any scheme that classifies persons in terms of their relative characteristic mental health, those with any personality disorder fall at the bottom. Is that true?
According to that textbook, yes.
Do you agree with that?
Yes, I do.
Does the DSM-3 agree with that?
Yes.
Such persons uniformly have trouble working, loving, and dealing with the world.
Correct.
Is that true?
Yes.
And that would be true whether Ms. Wuornos suffered from an antisocial personality disorder or a borderline personality disorder or both.
That is correct.
If the clinician but penetrates the armor or the protective covering of the personality disorder, one finds anxiety, depression, and pain. Is that true?
That is the reason that clients try and hold on to their disorder, not necessarily consciously, but because of the pain underneath if someone tries to get through to that.
All persons with personality disorders have difficulty adapting to the world, attempting instead to make the world adapt to them.
That is correct.
From Kaplan and Satter. A personality disorder is a way of making a painful truce with people one can neither live with nor live without. Have you seen that in your experience?
Yes.
And that's true of all personality disorders.
Correct.
If neurotic symptoms are often the modes by which one copes with unbearable wishes and fears, personality disorders are the modes by which one copes with unbearable people.
Yes.
What does that mean? How does a person with a personality disorder, borderline, antisocial, whatever you want to label it, deal with the unbearable people they see about them?
Well, partly it varies, but generally, probably the most common situation is, again, to adapt to that person, to try and cope with that given situation. Sometimes that results in paranoia. Sometimes that results in further rejection, which again just intensifies the personality needs of that individual.
And in fact, is the very next sentence. Consequently, their behavior consistently annoys other people, which results in their being labeled bad or sick.
That's correct. And that, I would say, would be particularly true of a borderline.
Thus, the disorders, all personality disorders, are characterized by the tendency to create a vicious cycle in which the already precarious interpersonal relationships are made worse by the person's manner of adapting
That's correct.
and of dealing in a world in which they cannot function.
Correct.
Is that true of her?
Very much so.
Whatever you want to label it?
Very much so.
Mr. Tanner asked you about how a person suffering from a borderline personality disorder would have been labeled before the DSM-3.
Yes.
DSM-3 came out in the 70s or something?
Yeah.
Before that was the DSM-2?
Correct.
And I think I touched on it on direct examination. Before that, a clinician seeing the type of behavior that Lee Wuornos exhibits, some clinicians would characterize her as schizophrenic, right?
The most common categories given to those individuals now called borderlines would be schizoid personality disorder, paranoid personality disorder, or schizophrenic.
So before you had the borderline personality disorder, she would be labeled as schizoid, as paranoid, those types of things.
She may have been, yes.
And those types of people traditionally have been hospitalized, have they not?
Many,
They get medication in hospitals, do they not?
generally,
They get treated.
yes.
The school report that Mr. Tanner asked you about, he asked you some questions about the verbal and the performance IQ. He talked about dull normal being a category. There are terms of art that clinicians use, are there not?
Yes.
And if you can just explain, as I understand it, there's average or normal, and there's another one that's called dull normal, and then you get into the borderline or impaired.
At the time that she took that test, the categories are based on statistical frequency in the total population. So for example, if a person comes out with an IQ between 90 and 110, that person has the same IQ as approximately 70% of the entire population. Once you deviate from that, you either go up above average or below average. The actual category from 80 to 90 is called dull normal. Starting below 80 is called borderline retardation. The reason it was labeled in the report as low, dull, normal, because that is the name of the category, and it's low because it was only 1 point from a borderline retarded score.
So the category goes average or normal?
And that's, at that time, it was called normal, and then it goes dull, normal, borderline retardation.
90 to 110.
Correct.
And then borderline, and then low, dull, normal, 80 to 90.
Just dull, normal.
Dull, normal, 80 to 90.
Correct.
And under 80, borderline retardation.
Yes.
She was at 80, was she not?
Yes.
She was at the cutoff for borderline retardation under that systematic.
1 point from that.
If she had scored 1 point under that, she would be classified as borderline retarded, would she not?
Yes.
The second part of the sentence, which Mr. Tanner did not read to you, indicates that the split between the verbal and the performance IQ yields a significant divergence of 26 points.
She's laughing because they just called her a borderline R word, and I can't say it. And she's laughing. Her own defense just called her that. And her hair is a mess today. Hello, Baker chat. We're almost done. As soon as this wraps up, I'm going to set up the stream for Lori Vallow, and then we will go there. What's up? Thank you for sending the fellow morons to come talk to this other moron who was in your chat yesterday. She has a sense of something, Chrissy. I'm not sure what it is. She's been crying. Looked like she was going to eat a Kleenex. And now that he's calling her that, or saying she's there, she's laughing. I don't know. I have no idea what's happening, but we are almost done with this. Also, if you didn't see Baker's stream yesterday, you need to go watch it. He did excellent. You'll be angry. I was grocery shopping and trying not to, road rage with my cart because I was getting so mad at the guy that was on with Baker. But he did an excellent job. Baker did. I will not speak for the other guy. All right, let's finish this up, shall we? Good Lord.
Yes.
What were the people who were testing her in school saying when they saw that split between her verbal IQ, her ability to reason, and her performance IQ?
Whenever we see a split like that, and that is a significantly large split, even a split of any more than 10-point difference, we immediately suspect some type of learning disability or some type of organic problem. And what that record is suggesting is the need for further evaluation and further assessment and treatment for someone who has that kind of split in their IQ scores.
And right now we were talking about Lee being on the border of mental retardation, right?
In that verbal, the verbal areas.
And she's sitting here laughing while you're talking about that.
Apparently.
Is that consistent with a borderline personality disorder?
Yes.
We're talking about these impairments she has suffered throughout her life.
Yes.
And you're
Haven't seen Zach today. But if he pops in, you feel free. He's the only person that has ever timed me out. He said it was only for 10 seconds. I told him it felt like 10 minutes. It was awful. Also, if you guys don't know, we're watching Aileen Wuornos. America's first female serial unaliver, blah, blah, blah. She's not. We know. She is kind of going a little crazy here today. Again.
your experienced patients that you see off the street, are they uncomfortable when they listen to what is wrong with them?
Sure.
Does she seem to understand anything that you're saying here?
At one level, she understands. The way she is coping with it, though, is certainly inappropriate.
And why is that?
Because it's extremely hard for Lee or other individuals with that diagnosis to accept that there is anything wrong with her.
That same school report indicated that her split and her low, dull, normal verbal IQ indicated difficulty in assimilation of facts, numerical concepts, word knowledge, and social awareness, that those things were far below average.
Correct.
Is that consistent?
Sure.
Is that consistent with how she is today?
Appears to be, yes.
The outstanding feature was a remarkable concern for strong family ties. Language lack restricts ability to organize experience and interact with peers. Is that consistent with what you've seen today?
I would say that if they had a borderline personality disorder category back then, just even hearing that would fit her into that.
Moral values, concern for her.
Sorry. And I always tell everybody the guy behind who Gabby calls Doogie Howser here is the jury with the big yellow stickers that basically says jury. They've also called them out by their names after they did find her guilty and polled the jury. They called each one of them by their name, not number, and they show them quite frequently. It's very different in 1992. And yes, Brandon, this is just the penalty, or this is the penalty phase. The ultimate punishment comes later.
The family's hurt contribute to her guilt feelings. It is vital for this girl's welfare that she receive counseling immediately. That's the school report.
That is correct.
An antisocial personality disorder as its precursor oftentimes in a dysfunctional family.
Yes.
Why?
We learn from our environment. We learn from our family, generally speaking. Positive role models, positive modeling generally result in positive behavior. Negative role models, dysfunctional models and modeling typically result in dysfunctional behavior.
An antisocial personality disorder does not exclude a borderline personality disorder.
Oh, no.
Are you more messed up when you got both?
You certainly could be, but in this case, I would certainly say that the borderline personality disorder is so classic that it essentially has dominated Ms. Wuornos' functioning.
And on top of all that, in this case, you have cognitive impairments. You have cerebral dysfunction.
Based on the testing, yes.
Based on the testing, you have a brain that is impaired.
Yes.
Wow. Are you coming back?
You testified,
There they
I
are.
asked you about starting fires. You said no, not before 15, correct?
I said deliberately setting fires before 15. I was not aware of that.
Okay. Well, had you been provided the statement of
He didn't. Did they back up when that little thing just happened there? I thought we were on redirect. Yes. She is stupid. She could fit on your channel. The rest of us morons. Yeah. Well, Valhalla is a mod in here too, Chrissy. So there might be a fight. Yes, Bravo Court TV. We've already heard this part, right? And Bri, isn't this watching this trial is not kind of like watching the Titanic? It ends the same way. I don't know if it's recross or not, Flashman, because he's asking about fires again. I'm going right here. I just want to see. All right. I don't think there's any boobies, but there's been a lot of talk about brown eyes. Eye, singular. Things happening back there. I don't know how to say it. Embarrass me. I'm going to embarrass myself, so what I'm going to do. Yes, there's been lots of sausages. There was a sausage. Lots of sausage truck drivers. Titanic did have boobies. I don't think it had butt play. This is good Christian channel. I'm learning from Baker how to be that. That's what he says. I'm learning from him. I'm gonna have to learn 2 more languages, but before I can be at his level. But I'm still trying. All right, I gotta finish this up. This guy. I don't know where we are. It's been that kind of a day.
Personality disorders, borderline personality disorders, common, isn't it?
Among people in general? No.
It's not?
No.
How about grabbing the DSM-3 and help me understand this statement in page 347?
I don't have the same one you have. I have the same content, but not the same pages.
Maybe we get the same page. May I approach witness?
Sure.
Begin reading, or is it prevalence?
Thanks,
Chapter 347, you said?
Yes, sir.
It says, according to prevalence, borderline personality disorder is apparently common.
Thank you.
They're referring to clinical populations.
Oh, the words apparently common don't have the normal meaning that we understand it because it's in a psychology book.
That whole book is referring to clinical populations.
So that you can interpret it any way you want according to psychologists, regardless of how it reads.
That's a clinical book.
That's what Bryce said.
Well, how about this? Prevalence with regard to antisocial personality disorder. What about that? How common is that?
It's among populations who have engaged in some type of criminal behavior. It is also fairly common, but certainly not totally. It does not totally explain all criminal behavior. But certainly there are individuals who are in the judicial system who do have antisocial personality disorder.
It is uncommon for a person with just borderline personality disorder to kill numerous people, isn't it?
It's unusual for anybody to kill.
Very unusual, isn't it?
Yes.
But it would be more usual for someone in the category of antisocial personality disorder, wouldn't it?
Statistically, that is correct.
They kill more people than the borderline folks.
Objection, Your Honor.
They kill more people than borderline folks, don't they?
That is correct.
And in fact, in America, less than 1% of American females have the antisocial personality disorder, correct?
I'm not aware of that statistic, but I'll accept that.
Well, would you accept that prevalence, and let me just read, antisocial personality disorder, 343, says, in fact, let me just ask you if you'll read the prevalence. You read the prevalence on the borderline, this is the antisocial.
It says the estimate of the prevalence of antisocial personality among American males is about 3%, and for American females is less than 1%.
Thank you. Aileen Wuornos is legally sane, isn't she?
Yes.
She's competent to stand trial, isn't she?
Yes, she is.
She's responsible for her acts, isn't she?
Yes.
And she understands the consequences of her acts, doesn't she?
Yes.
What other question, Your Honor?
Your Honor, I need to change my paper.
Leave that podium.
Thank you.
The disorders listed in the statistical manual are disorders, right?
Yes.
The people this book talks about are people who are impaired.
Correct.
The clinical group this book describes are people who are functioning at a level below the vast majority of society.
That is correct.
People who are deficient,
In some ways, yes.
people who are disturbed, people who are impaired.
Correct.
The borderline personality disorder, according to the DSM-3R, is more commonly diagnosed in females,
That is correct.
and Lee Wuornos is a female.
Yes.
When it says that that disorder is common, it means common among people who have mental health problems,
That is correct.
among people who are hospitalized.
Not necessarily hospitalized, but
At
just
large-
people that somehow come to the attention
Okay.
of professionals.
Let me read you the part in the antisocial personality disorder that Mr. Tanner did not read to you. Let me tell you
1992, Brandon. Good old 90s. Yeah, this is Aileen Wuornos. You know the movie Monster? This is her. This is her trial. This is the penalty phase. She's already been found guilty. I mean, spoiler alert if you didn't know her. It is not 1962, Flashman. 1992. Just because you weren't born, you're still vintage. That's why he gets his little court reporter here. And she's actually, you know how on TV they're like, can you read that back? She's actually been able to do that. And it's kind of nice. They don't have to be like, oh, I can't find that in the transcript. And yes, that's exactly how they sound. All right, we go. I'm not answering you, Flashman, because I can't come up with anything.
if this is consistent with your understanding.
Your Honor, please, I object to frame the question. I didn't read the whole book. You can
Withdrawn.
read anything you want. I shouldn't be faulted for not reading it.
Withdrawn. Let me read you another part out of the DSM-3R in the antisocial personality disorder section. And this is talking about the commonality, how common this is among disturbed individuals. The disorder is more common in lower class populations, partly because it is associated with impaired earning capacity, and partly because fathers of those with the disorder frequently have the disorder themselves, and consequently, their children often grow in impoverished homes. That's one of the common characteristics.
Yes.
And her family was dysfunctional.
Yes.
And she had her disorders when she was with Mr. Mallory.
Yes.
Were you able to formulate, I know Mr. Tanner asked you some questions about sanity. You don't think that Ms. Wuornos was insane at the time she was with Mr. Mallory?
No.
But she did have the borderline personality disorder when she was with him.
She still has it.
That disturbance that she had since childhood was with her when she was with him.
Sure.
To a reasonable degree of psychological certainty, was her capacity to conform her conduct to the requirements of the law substantially impaired when she was with Mr. Mallory
I would say yes,
because of her disorders?
because of her disorder.
To a reasonable degree of psychological certainty, was her capacity to understand the nature and consequences of her actions substantially impaired when she was with Mr. Mallory?
Yes.
Not obliterated, not absent, but impaired.
Yes.
And when she was with Mr. Mallory, did she have an extreme mental or emotional disturbance?
In my opinion, yes.
And those are the disorders we've been talking about.
Yes.
The disorders you see sitting here before you today.
Correct.
Nothing further.
No questions, Your Honor. Thank you.
Discharge, Your Honor.
Stop. All right. Well then, Flashman, I will say this. If they're saying they would tell your Uncle Fish he smells like fish and he'd say he takes one to no one, you're saying you're vintage, then I guess I would say takes one to no one. I'm vintage too. All right. Well, that was the riveting testimony of two psychologists trying to keep Aileen Wuornos alive from being unalived by the state. you know, she had some weird reactions to things. You guys came in when she was laughing at them, calling her the R word, borderline R word, I think is the word. They didn't say R word, obviously, but I have to say that. I don't think that probably played well for the jury, just to sit there and laugh. I don't know if she thought that would make her look like she was maybe not, that she was a little crazy. Yes, a crap ton of objections. And this has been a case, a trial where the lawyers like to fight and yell at each other. We saw a little bit of it today, but it's been interesting because they're not allowed to do that anymore. So, and this judge, he gets shorter and shorter up here every day. He's just like shrinking down. So, he's fun because pretty soon he's going to disappear. So, one of them punched each other in the face. You lie. Flash fan? You're going to get me in trouble. Yes, he is the shrinking judge. It's the case of the shrinking judge. So I didn't call him a witch. Dang, Bri. That's what that big book was for that he was reading earlier. He wanted to read it first before he had to sit on it. All right. Give me a minute. Sorry. I'm going to set up a stream. We're going to go watch Lori Vallow's opening statements. She is representing herself. Don't know that it'll be along the Daryl Brooks, like his craziness, but I'm sure there'll be some crazy because she is allegedly a little crazy. And everyone that meets her seems to not be alive anymore. So this trial that she's on, I think the one she's on trial now is, I think, her fifth husband. That she's charged with first-degree unaliving, conspiracy to unalive. Her brother is actually the one who, how many times can I say unalived? Unalived the guy whose name escapes me right at this moment. So we're going to go watch her. I don't think she'll be another Brooks, but I think she'll be whiny. I really do. She's representing herself. She has nothing to lose. But so I'm going to set that up and then we will go watch that fun. Might be a little bit behind start at 2, but we can fast forward through some stuff. Like jury instructions. She is a lot of things. She is she's like a weird version of Medusa. You don't turn to stone, but don't touch her because you're just, her brother died of weird things. Her third husband died of weird things. I think I could put her on the list of serial unalivers. Allegedly. Are crazy ladies less than, and crazy ladies are less than, hey, that statistic is back from 1992. I'm sure it's a lot different now, Bri. I'm sure that number has gone up. Just saying. All right. See you guys all in a few minutes. I just need to set this up real quick. I didn't have time before I started this one today because I wasn't sure if I was going to do it, but we are going to go do it. So I will be right back, and hopefully you guys will come back in just a minute.